Chapter 140. There were as many small islands in the South China Sea as there were stars in the sky. It was too difficult to find them. Thea's actions could not be exposed. She was limited by fuel. For the first 2 days, she had to return to the port on time, whether it was refueling, accommodation, or comfort in the city. For the next 2 days, she was too lazy to fly back and forth. She added 2 more fuel tanks. During the day, she hid on the island to bask in the sun. She summoned the little unicorn to keep a lookout and went out to look for people at night. She had to avoid the patrol boats, fishery administration boats, and maritime boats on the sea. It was very tiring. I'm so sleepy. Miss Sia wandered around like a thief every night, so she was naturally lethargic during the day. Looking at the little unicorn running around with its 4 little hooves in the distance, the unicorn was very satisfied with the fresh air and sunshine on this island and had a lot of fun. Thea suddenly thought of a problem. She said in her heart in a tone of seduction, "Come here, come here." Theoretically, they could communicate with each other without any problems. However, the little unicorn was too young now. It could only convey some thoughts like it was hungry and comfortable. Thanks to the strong sun these days, the little unicorn had grown bigger. If it used to be the size of a palm, it was now the size of a foot. The little unicorn jumped happily in front of Thea. It thought that she was going to give it something to eat. This little guy was not picky. 2 days ago, it ate the squid Thea bought at a roadside stall in Hong Kong happily. Looking at the little unicorn who was shaking its head and wagging its tail to flatter her, Thea rolled her eyes. She quickly grabbed the little unicorn's 2 front paws and lifted it up. Her eyes quickly scanned its lower body. It's a little princess. That's good. If it's a male, it'll be awkward to put it together. The little unicorn kicked her with its 2 hind legs. However, it was too far away and could not do any damage. Thea quickly put it down before it was about to spit. She also stroked its mane. Whether it was useful or not, it was at least comforting. After confirming its gender, the rest was easy. I should give you a name, Thea thought while touching her chin. What? You have a name? No, I have to give you a name. Thea declared her sovereignty domineeringly, but she couldn't think of a good name because of her difficulty in naming. So, my daughter, the day you were born, the entire Lordaeron forest whispered the same name. Arthas. What do you think of this name? Are you happy? Thea couldn't think of a better name even after racking her brains. She slapped her thigh and decided to use this name. Ignoring the little unicorn's objections, he grabbed it up and threw it into the air twice. That was the end of the naming ceremony. She decided to let it play by itself. Sia found a place with plenty of light and continued to sleep. Day and night, night and day. Hard work paid off. Sia finally saw the large island in front of her at dawn on the 7th day. It's really hard to find. No one told me that there are such thick clouds around this broken island. Thea was a little depressed. She had flown over this area before, but the thick fog made her automatically ignore it. It wasn't until this morning that she found traces of the island under the fog. The half-moon-shaped island was densely covered with primeval forests. In the center of the island was a watchtower built by the ancient Han people. On the south side was a ditch, where the submarine from the Foot Basin country in World War II crashed into the rocks. She repeatedly compared it with her memory. This should be it. Thea had no intention of getting her hands on the biochemical drug Miraculou. She didn't need the power that sacrificed her rationality, but she didn't mind taking a few bottles back for research. That professor who was searching for the drug had a hole in his head. This was a drug from the Foot Basin country during World War II, 50 years after the present day. It wasn't that there weren't any scientists who were 50 years ahead of humanity, but they were few and far between. As for those people from the Foot Basin country, Thea didn't think they had the ability to do so. The tribunal's experiment on strengthening humans had some similarities with Miraculou. She would give them a bottle and see if they could learn from each other. Thea didn't fly over to look for them. The island was much bigger than she imagined, about the size of a second-tier city. Oliver thought that there were only a few of them on the island, but he was wrong. There were people who planted flowers, made medicine, dug holes, and searched for treasures on the island. There were thousands of mercenaries from all over the world. If you left today, I'd come back tomorrow. There was no free time at all. It was just that the island was too big, and no one would bump into each other. She lowered the altitude, found a small valley, and parked the helicopter. This time she took out all her equipment. Not a single arrow was missing. Her mechanical arm had also been successfully developed. Relying on Batman's nanotechnology, the mechanical arm was usually worn as 3 accessories on her left arm. With a press of a switch, it could be armed in 1 second. At full power, it could carry 2 to 10 tons of force. The arm was made of hafnium metal. This metal was resistant to high temperature and wear. It could even withstand large-caliber bullets. It was a rare alloy used by the Federal Reserve for their vault doors. There were 3 sharp claws inside. They were made of titanium alloy and a small amount of carbon nitride. These 3 claws had kept the 50 scientists in Quinn's Applied Sciences department busy for a month. The results didn't disappoint Thea. After many rounds of experiments, she hadn't found any metal that she couldn't cut, other than those white dwarfs and neutron stars. She packed her luggage and made some camouflage for the helicopter. Even if she was discovered, she could fly back with the skateboard. It was just not as comfortable as a plane. She flew onto the skateboard. If she didn't have magic, it would be difficult. But now she only needed to use a tracking spell to find Oliver, who was connected to her by blood. So far, the magical guidance was faintly discernible. It could only mean that the distance between them was far beyond the limit of magic detection. It's in the west. After confirming repeatedly, Sia flew close to the ground and faced the distance. The sun gradually moved to the west. The afterglow of the setting sun was reflected in the clear lake. A man and a woman stood face to face. The man looked sad, as if he was carrying a mountain on his back. The woman looked at him worriedly. There was some sympathy and love in her eyes. I just feel that this island has made me very scary. The man's voice was low, and his tone was full of sadness. The woman thought for a moment. She scooped up a handful of water from the lake and smeared it between the man's eyebrows. There is no island, no place that can make you become what you don't want to be. But her words didn't dispel the man's discouragement. So I've always been an assassin? The woman organized her words. Everyone has a demon in their heart. The Tao Te Ching talks about the relationship between yin and yang. We all have 2 opposing forces in our hearts. Darkness and light, assassins and heroes. After saying that, she touched the man's face. Her eyes were full of love. They didn't know that not far away, a muscular middle-aged man was watching them hug each other into the water. His eyes were full of struggle and unwillingness. Chapter 141. When Thea arrived, she happened to see this scene. She wasn't ready to act out the melodramatic reunion of the siblings. She wanted to test their abilities. She put on the hooded glasses. Although European and American face blindness was serious, and people wouldn't recognize her if she wore a pair of glasses like Superman or Supergirl, she still felt that it was not safe. She used the black fog to cover her face. It was hazy. Not to mention Oliver, who hadn't seen her for more than a year. Even old Ma wouldn't be able to recognize her now. It doesn't look right. Be careful not to get a needle eye. Thea's long-range infrared glasses instantly found the middle-aged man peeping in the forest. Without alerting the 2 below, she circled half a circle behind the middle-aged man and mocked him maliciously. The muscular middle-aged man was the future death knell, the current Slade Wilson. He was half teacher and half friend to Oliver, who was fighting with a woman in the water. Just as he was burning with jealousy, he suddenly heard the words behind him. Without thinking, he turned around and slashed down. Your swordsmanship isn't bad. Thea nodded. Slade wasn't a pure martial artist. He was a mercenary. His swordsmanship was simple and quick, fully displaying his own characteristics. His strength and speed combined with his height and arm length made this slash full of momentum and power. Even if Thea was given a sword to slash, she wouldn't be able to bring out the charm of this sword. Slade didn't reject firearms. He could combine pistols and rifles with traditional cold weapons. But now that he was in purgatory, there were no firearms. Fortunately, his cold weapons weren't weak. He was good at the Kali martial arts of the Philippines and had practiced this skill to the peak. His swordsmanship in Kali martial arts could only be considered average. It was still far from being profound. But this average swordsmanship was based on Slade's own understanding and rich experience. He could bring out 150% of it in battle. Thea was a little excited. With her current level of fighting skills, There weren't many who could be considered her opponent. She couldn't fly to Gotham every day to find Batman to practice. Today, she finally met this non-famous crosstalk actor. No non-famous martial artist. She didn't use magic or mechanical arms. She only used her own martial arts to fight with him. Sia quickly dodged the attack, pulled out her sword, and stabbed at his throat with a backhand motion. Richard didn't expect this guy covered in black fog to be so strong and fast. He could only pull out the other long saber on his back and block the swift sword. "Who are you?" He was a little puzzled. How could there be such a powerful person on the island? Thea didn't pay any attention to him at all. The sword in her hand was like a snake as it pierced through several vital points on his body. Richard was a little annoyed that he didn't get the answer he wanted to hear. Taking advantage of his height and strength, he slashed left and right with his two swords and fought with Thea. Thea did not take the broad path of Batman. Of the 127 types of martial arts, she had only practiced a little more than 20. Although her IQ was considered top-notch, she had not reached the limits of human beings like Batman. Learning too much would only make her dizzy. Batman's method was only suitable for himself. Therefore, she had never practiced Richard's Kali martial arts. From the bottom of her heart, she looked down on the Philippines. What kind of top-notch martial arts could a broken country like that have? After exchanging a few blows, she relied on parrying to familiarize herself with his moves and to spy on Richard's flaws. As a veteran, Richard naturally knew what she was trying to do. However, it was not an exaggeration to say that he was old and strong. He used the entire set of swordsmanship back and forth twice. He had no intention of changing his moves. His two long sabers flew up and down, trying to finish off his opponent as quickly as possible. Thea found it funny. This set of swordsmanship was really ordinary. Even the creator of this set of swordsmanship was not as good as the current Richard. After all, this wasn't swordsmanship at first. It was a stick technique. In the remote forests of the Philippines, there was almost no iron ore. Sticks could be seen everywhere. Long sabers? She could only laugh at that. Now, the two short sticks had been forcefully changed into dual sabers by Richard. The power had not decreased. Instead, it had multiplied. But that was it. After experiencing the Great Battle of Gotham and being taught by Batman, she was now considered a top fighter. Although her ranking was definitely not among the top few, seeing that Richard was only using the same few moves, Thea began to use her strong martial arts foundation and her advantage in agility. She dodged left and right, trying to disrupt Richard's rhythm. Although Thea's swordsmanship was superb, she quickly found a flaw. Richard used his left saber to protect himself, while his right saber slashed horizontally at Thea's neck. This move was actually quite clever. However, Filipinos were short, so it was very lethal. Richard was tall, so this slash was a little too high. Thea shrunk her neck and nimbly dodged the slash. Without waiting for him to put away his saber, she turned around and held her sword with both hands, aiming the blade at the body of the saber. With a light shout, her sword cut through his long saber. Richard's hand suddenly became empty. He knew he was in trouble. His opponent was too cunning. She had been holding her sword silently. Now she suddenly attacked and caught him off guard. He saw Thea's wrist tremble slightly, and the sword made a half circle stabbing towards his eyes. "Stop!" a woman shouted. Although her tone was urgent, the gentle and delicate feeling in her voice was still lingering. Sia had long noticed her and Oliver rushing over. Although the two of them had the elegance of a mad scholar from the Wei Jin dynasty, at least they knew what kind of environment they were in. On the other side, Slade was shouting as he fought. Although this was his personal fighting style, he also had the intention of calling for help to form a team to fight Sia. When the two heard the commotion, they didn't know if the fight was over. They hurriedly ran over. Seeing that Richard was about to die, Shadow Yaodong shouted. She drew her bow and tried to rescue Richard by surrounding him. She wanted to equalize the situation first. Faced with an arrow that was inferior to her in terms of strength and speed, Thea smiled. She used the stab to cut, forcing Richard to retreat. Then she turned around and aimed at the arrow. She reached out with her jade-white left hand and easily caught the arrow. "Who are you?" Shadow was in a sorry state. Her hair was wet, and she ran out in only her black underwear. She was a little worried about her mysterious opponent. Although she didn't know about the Assassin League, She had seen her father catch the arrow with her bare hands. She wondered if this person was her father's enemy. Thea looked at Shadow, who was only in her underwear, and found it funny. She couldn't help but glance at her little pigeon. Finally, she found someone younger than her. After all, she was surrounded by women like Laurel and Catwoman every day. Thea was under a lot of pressure. This girl in front of her had a well-proportioned body and smooth skin. How would she feel? She glanced at Oliver, who was beside her. To be honest, she was a little disappointed. Oliver's footsteps were sluggish, and his eyes were unfocused. Forget about the future Green Arrow, he couldn't even compare to Tommy, who was currently a rookie hero in Star City. Chapter 142. Actually, she had wronged Oliver. After all, Oliver had stayed on this lousy island for more than a year, spending every day with Yao Fei and Richard, the two old bachelors. Although he had practiced archery for a few days as a young man, he had nowhere to vent his energy. Recently, old Yao had sadly passed away, and his beautiful daughter had come to teach Oliver archery. Although he felt a little sorry for old Yao's ardent expectations, it was always pleasing to see a beautiful lady replaced by a fierce old man. Not to mention such a gentle girl, even Oliver would get excited when he saw a sow. He felt that the heavens had not mistreated him. Today, he had suffered a bit of a blow, and Shadow had gone to comfort him. The two were on the same wavelength, and they were about to bond over the lake. Just as the water reached the canal and was about to flow, Shadow heard Richard shout. She hurriedly interrupted him, and the two hurried over to help. His mind was muddled, and his thoughts had not switched to the battle channel. He took out his pistol and assumed what he thought was a standard combat posture. He looked at Richard from the corner of his eye, waiting for his big brother to make a decision. Slade didn't hide anything from Sia. He gestured at the two of them to surround them. Sia felt that Shadow was only slightly stronger than the Union of Assassins, not to mention Oliver, who was a complete weakling. However, the three of them were still troublesome to deal with. Slade had a keen sense of the battlefield, and he was a rare master tactician. It would be embarrassing if he was countered by them. She looked at the time. It was time for the Een runes to recharge. She shook her shoulders. Under the three's shocked gazes, a clone that looked exactly like her walked out of the shadows. Thea threw the bow to the clone and pointed at Shadow and Oliver with her chin, implying that they were hers. The clone had her skills and thought process. She sighed, knocked an arrow, and shot at the dumbfounded Shadow. Let's continue. Thea didn't care if the three's jaws dropped. She picked up her sword and continued to beat Richard. Mutant. Although he had never seen it with his own eyes, he felt that the guy in front of him was very much like a legendary psychic because he had never heard of anyone who practiced martial arts and turned into two people. Thea did not deny it. Guess as you wish. If Olivier and Shadow asked, I would explain. But you? Forget it. No matter how hard Slade tried to defend himself, he had not been injected with Miraculu, so he was still in the normal range in all aspects. Against a technical grandmaster of combat like Thea, he was having a hard time. Although he looked mighty and loud, he was actually using up a lot of his stamina. Thea diverted a bit of her attention to the other side. Her doppelganger's archery skills completely suppressed Shadow's. If it weren't for the fact that she didn't want to hurt her, she would have killed her long ago. On the other side, Oliver held a gun and found that no one was paying attention to him. He looked at the battlefield uneasily and wanted to help, but he felt that the situation on both sides was quite dangerous, so he hesitated. Hit this. This is my real body. Slade, who was at a complete disadvantage, was still very clear-headed. Although he had never seen a doppelganger technique before, his intuition told him to make the right decision. As expected of the master tactician who almost defeated the alliance, Thea couldn't help but admire him. It seemed that she shouldn't use this technique in front of the enemy next time. Facing Oliver's gun, she glanced at it indifferently. Although she was not afraid, she did not want to play dodging games. She loudly recited a famous saying from the Assassin League. Guns are the toys of the weak. With a flick of her hand, she enveloped Oliver with dark mist. With the help of her recent diligent training, she could now cast this spell on her own, which originally required a dagger as a guide. With the help of the Een mark, she could cast it faster and more powerful. With the help of the Een mark, She could cast dark mist and suggestion instantly. However, if it was daytime, these two spells would be difficult to cast and their effects would be weakened. The ancients relied on the sky to make a living. Now she could use spells according to the time. It was a rare thing. Anyone would panic when their vision suddenly turned pitch black, and Oliver was no exception. "I can't see." Slade was shocked and shouted, "Calm down, don't shoot randomly." He was the closest to Thea, and Oliver had aimed in this direction before. He was afraid that Oliver would shoot him carelessly. In fact, he had underestimated the future Green Arrow. Not to mention her combat ability, her psychological quality was already showing the essence of a hero. This was Oliver's first time coming into contact with magic. After the initial panic, he quickly calmed down. He moved back and forth a few steps, and found that his surroundings were still pitch black. He didn't know that Thea's magic had been slightly modified. Originally it was cast at a fixed location, but now it was cast while attached to the enemy. The duration of the spell would be reduced by the target's body, but the effect was better. Hearing Slade's shout, Oliver also responded loudly, "I know I won't move." At least there was something good about him. Thea's impression of her brother improved a little. "Since you're so calm, the next spell won't scare you, right?" Hopefully Thea drew a few runes in the air with her left hand. She aimed at Oliver's black fog, and a black light shot out. This was the only spell she had memorized from the pile of parchments in the Arcana realm. It was supposed to be a targeted spell, but after considering her own situation, she changed it into black fog immobilization. She could use the black fog on the target for a second time. First, her mana consumption was reduced by more than half. Secondly, the new spell circuit only needed to slightly modify the black fog immobilization. It was safe, fast, and could unleash the effects of her Een runes. Seeing that her spell was finished, Thea opened her left hand, aimed at Oliver and clenched it. Huh! Oliver, who was fumbling in the dark, found that he had regained his vision. He was secretly delighted. It was not a good feeling to be blind. He decided to stay away from the mysterious person. "I can't mess with you, so I'll hide, okay? I'll go help the little beauty shadow, okay?" But just as he was about to move, he was shocked to find that he couldn't move at all. Slade was about to call him over to help, but when he saw him gritting his teeth, he couldn't help but be stunned. Thinking of Sia's murmur just now, he was completely stunned. He was just a mercenary now, not a death knell in the future. With his knowledge, understanding people with superpowers was the limit. He had never even heard of a mage at a higher level, let alone seen one. This was the first time in his life that he had come into contact with a supernatural power. His hands and feet were in a mess, and Sia found an opening and knocked him to the ground. Just as he straightened his neck and was about to fight back, Sia hit him on the back of the neck with a karate chop. Phew! Now that this eyesore was taken care of, the rest was much easier. The doppelganger forced Shadow to retreat with 2 arrows. She handed the bow to the real body and disappeared like a shadow. Chapter 143. Hey! Shadow ran to Oliver's side and saw him posing like a statue in a temple. She was a little annoyed and pushed him with normal strength. She pushed him again, but he didn't move. She pushed him again. Clang! Oliver fell to the ground like a piece of wood. Thea felt a chill run down her spine. Is he going to get a concussion? It would be a loss for the Justice League if he became a retard. She quickly snapped her fingers and stopped the magic. Oliver felt like he was out of luck today. The goddess he admired was about to have sex with him, but he didn't get to have her. He was also blinded during the battle and became severely paralyzed. Finally, he was thrown to the ground by his goddess and almost threw up his dinner from last night. But at least he knew that there were enemies in front of him. He shouted Richard's name a few times, but there was no reply. He stood beside Shadow and looked at Thea in panic. "Oliver Quinn, do you want to go home? I can send you back." Thea didn't want to waste time talking nonsense with him. "If you can, you can. If you can't, you can continue to stay here." Thea was in a dilemma. She wasn't afraid of his poor martial arts skills. If Talia could teach him, she could teach him too. The key was his heart. He didn't have the awareness to be a hero. Yao Fei's first year of teaching was a complete failure. As long as she revealed her identity, he would definitely go with her. But was that really his true intention? If he didn't learn martial arts, Even if he was a good-for-nothing for the rest of his life, Thea could take over his job. There were only a few villains in Star City. They could all be eliminated in a breath. But that wasn't the point. As his family, Thea didn't ask him to save people. She only asked him to save himself. But it was easier said than done. Plus, no one else could help him. She could only rely on him to walk out of the shadow between self-affirmation and self-denial. She couldn't find a few bad guys to torture him. As the saying went, if there's trouble, you have to fight. If there's no trouble, you have to create trouble. It would be better to leave him on Purgatory Island and continue on his original path of fate if he spent so much effort. Thea finished her question and stared at him silently, waiting for his answer. Oliver did not know that this question would decide his future. He was a little dumbfounded, but he was not stupid. He immediately reacted. You were sent by my family? Thea nodded and didn't say anything. I'm your family and I sent myself here. There's nothing wrong with what you said. Do I have such a fierce person in my family? Oliver turned his head to look at the unconscious Richard on the ground. Previously, he had thought that Richard was as swift as the wind and as ferocious as a tiger, and that he was about to become the world's #1 expert. Now, he had actually been defeated by an expert his family had found. This made him misjudge the Quinn family's background. Just as he was about to agree, he fell silent. Could he really pretend that nothing had happened and continue to be a playboy in Star City? Old Robert had given him a mission. Did he have the courage to cut off everything to complete it? I think. Oliver looked at Shadow, who was nodding at him. What about them? He asked. What about them? They are my friends, so they have to go with me. Thea pointed at Shadow. She can. She pointed at the unconscious Slade. He can't. Why? At this moment, Oliver felt a little puzzled. Thea thought for a moment and said vaguely, this person will cause you irreparable harm in the future. Do you still want to take him with you? If someone had said this to him before today, Oliver would have spat all over that person's face. However, Thea's spells had shocked him too much. His worldview was showing signs of shattering. He had no choice but to think carefully. However, Thea's words were too vague. How could it be irreparable harm? Was it wounds on his body or the death of his family? The range was too vague. Oliver thought for a long time but could not think of any harm. He thought back to the times when he had known and accompanied Slade. The two of them had been half teacher and half friend for more than a year. Slade was like an elder brother to him. Although he was very fierce, he had never hurt him. If you can't take him with you, I won't leave, Oliver said viciously. Oliver said fiercely. He even played a trick here. He thought that the other party was a hired thug and would at least give him some face. For the sake of the mission, the other party would definitely compromise, or at least discuss it with him, right? Unexpectedly, Sia nodded. All right, let's do it this way. Oliver was dumbfounded. Why didn't you follow the script? Under Oliver's dazed gaze, the mysterious person looked at Shadow. What about you? Are you going to leave this island? I can send you to Hong Kong. Your sister is still waiting for you. In fact, Thea did not know who her sister was. She was just casually making up a story based on the TV series. Yao Mei. Thinking of her twin sister, Shadow wavered. However, when she saw Oliver's pitiful gaze, she cruelly rejected Thea's suggestion. Thea saw their little exchange of glances but did not mind. I'll stay on the island for a few more days. If you change your mind. On second thought, they would not be able to contact her even if they changed their minds. Thea felt that this was not a good act. I'll come back when you change your mind. With that, he threw out a Batman smoke grenade and quickly disappeared from their line of sight. Slade. When Oliver saw the mysterious person disappear, he hurriedly went to check on his brother, who was lying motionless on the ground. Unexpectedly, Richard didn't even need his help. With a pair of ferocious eyes, he sat up on his own. Although Thea's technique was fine, she had underestimated Slade's extraordinary physique. Even without the injection of Miraculou, his physique was at the limit of a human's. A karate chop that could knock a normal person out for half an hour woke him up in less than 10 minutes. He was just afraid of Thea's strength, so he had been playing dead on the ground. Kid, did your family send that guy? Although Slade wanted to find a lot of excuses, such as the fact that his opponent was an adept, He knew that even without these factors, he would not be able to defeat his opponent. If the two of them came at him together, he would be dead by now. However, his question was difficult for Oliver to answer. He had been away from home for more than a year. Even if Moira was here, she would not be able to answer. After all, this was an era where Superman was still searching for his own worth. There was no sign of the official alliance yet. Even a government organization like the Sky's Eye Society could not find a master like Thea. Oliver stammered and could not give a clear answer. Slade thought that he did not want to talk about it, so he snorted. He picked up his twin knives. One of them had been broken by Thea. He was even more annoyed. That guy should have a plane or a ship that can leave this island. Let's go find him. Slade, with a murderous look, said to his two companions. The two of them nodded in agreement. Chapter 144. Look for his tracks. Follow the footprints and you'll be able to find his means of transportation. If you don't take me with you, I'll make sure you die on this island. Slade said fiercely. It was obvious that he had heard most of their conversation. He did not believe Thea's words about the future at all. He only thought that it was an excuse not to take him with them. However, 20 minutes later, the experienced veteran Slade was a little dumbfounded. He could only find traces of their battle. Why were there no footprints? Could it be that a living person flew here? This was completely contrary to his past experience. The more he thought about it, the more he broke down. His already shattered worldview was now completely destroyed. After looking at it over and over again, it seemed that flying here was the only explanation that made sense. His malicious plan to seize the ship had been foiled before the first step could be carried out. This made Slade feel a little uncomfortable, but he still had a glimmer of hope that he could leave the island. He planned to discuss it with the other two to see if they had any ideas. Thea did not go far. She still had to see someone, or rather pay respects to a loved one. She observed the movements of Oliver and the others and measured the ocean currents at the time of the accident. Finally, she found a shoal with rugged rocks. From time to time, there were seabirds searching for food in the shallow water. This is the starting point of everything. Thea got off the skateboard and walked slowly. He looked around and quickly found two mounds of rubble on one side of the high ground. The names Robert Quinn and Yao Fei were carved on the two wooden boards with sharp tools. Old Robert and Yao Fei were both buried here. Thea was a little sad. She took out a delicate bottle from her bag. Dad, I'm here to see you. This is the wine I stole from your study. I hope you. Thea was a little choked up as she spoke. She unscrewed the cap and slowly poured the wine on the grave. Although this way of paying respects was a little oriental, she could not find any canons or priests. She could only make do with it. As for moving him back to Star City, Thea had thought about it before. However, after some consideration, she gave up on the idea. Old Robert died with the desire to atone for his sins. He probably did not want to return to Star City, the city that brought him honor and shame. In the original drama, when Oliver returned to the city, he didn't mention anything about his father moving back to Star City. Presumably, he was thinking the same thing at that time. Thea sat on the ground and took a cup for herself. She poured some water on the grave and drank a cup herself. She was constantly immersed in the past. The bright full moon hung in the sky, and the bright moonlight shone on her body, making her battle suit even brighter. Drink with me. Thea had already taken off her hood, revealing her intoxicated face. She looked at the shade of a tree not far away with a playful expression. Shadow, who had been hiding behind the tree, had been here for a while. She first saw this mysterious man sitting in front of her father's grave and talking about something. She thought that it was an old friend of her father's, but not long after, she felt that something was wrong. This person either had bad eyesight, or the person she was talking to was not her father. Thea took off her hood. Under the moonlight, Shadow could see her side profile and where she was sitting. Shadow walked out of the shade and asked tentatively, "You are Thea Quinn. You must have heard of me, right?" Even though Shadow had mentally prepared herself, she was still a little shocked. She covered her mouth and asked, "You're Oliver's?" "Yes, I'm his sister." Thea looked at the woman who had encouraged Green Arrow when he was at his lowest. She sighed. What a gentle woman. Shadow widened her eyes and looked at her. "Are you kidding me? Is this how you communicate with your brother? Should I just beat him up without caring about anything else? Everything written in the books is true. The people of the United States are indeed living in an abyss of suffering. This billionaire family is indeed more complicated than our family of three. Thea saw the confusion in Shadow's eyes and guessed that she had misunderstood. What he needs now is not a family. He needs redemption. He needs to redeem himself. If he can get over it, he'll soar to the top. If he can't get over it, he'll achieve nothing. By the way, why are you here? Thea briefly told Shadow her thoughts. Halfway through, she remembered why she was here. This place was far from their current campsite. Of course, Shadow would not tell her that it was all because of what she said. Both Slade and Oliver had something on their minds. The campsite was too boring, so she came out for a stroll and ended up here by accident. Shadow walked to Thea and sat in front of Yao Fei's grave. 2 old men, 2 daughters. What a coincidence. Shadow thought that Thea would not understand her if she spoke in Chinese. She did not expect to meet a weirdo. Fate brings us together? Ah, you know Chinese. Shadow was shocked. Based on her understanding of Oliver's family, his family would not be exposed to Chinese. She felt a little embarrassed that her secret was exposed. Thea was amused when she saw Shadow's expression change from gentle to angry. She thought to herself, this is nothing. You haven't met Master Bruce. He can even sing Boundless Sea and Sky in Cantonese. Since they both knew Chinese, communication was much smoother. Shadow had to take care of Slade and Oliver, who were illiterate, every day. It was hard for her to speak English. The 2 women were on a deserted island. It was not appropriate for them to talk about makeup or clothes. They decided to talk about something more appropriate. Dad, aren't you going to move your father? Shadow, who believed in returning to one's roots, was surprised when she heard that Gu Nianji had no intention of moving the grave. What could Thea say? The cultural differences between the East and the West? It was a bit far-fetched and too broad. She could only tell Shadow her thoughts. What about you? I flew a helicopter here. I can help you move him back. I lied to you before. I didn't see your sister. I only know that she's in Hong Kong. If you want to go back. Thea's subtext was that if Shadow wanted to go back, she could find her sister to bury her father. It would be fine. If Shadow didn't want to go back, she, as an outsider, would not waste her time looking for him. She could just find a place to bury him. It would be worth it for Yao Fei to accompany old Robert for a few months. Well, Shadow was confused when they talked about herself. To her, burying her father and finding her sister were the most important things. Even if aliens came tomorrow, it was not as important as these 2 things. However, she did not want to give up Oliver on the island. I have something to say, but I don't know if I should say it, Thea said politely. Shadow rolled her eyes. I've seen TV dramas. It's not appropriate. Are you going to say that Oliver and I are not suitable? That's what a mother-in-law would say, right? You're really strange for a sister. Did you bring your checkbook? TSK. You're not playing by the rules. Thea was a little upset. This was not the right way to describe it. There were too many family dramas in the country. Shadow was experienced. Chapter 145. Although she choked back half of her words, she still had to say it. Sia cleared her throat and said, Ahem, you and Oliver are indeed not suitable. Don't glare at me, at least not now. Shadow's beautiful eyebrows were raised as she glared at her angrily. She probably couldn't beat her in a fight, or she would have argued with her this morning. Oliver and I are a match made in heaven. Is it appropriate for a sister like you to say that? I know you don't want to hear it, but I still have to say it. Did you notice the gaze of the man with 2 swords on his back? As Sia spoke, she even gestured to the 1.9-meter tall man with a full beard. This wasn't a game. It was impossible to know the other party's name just by meeting them. At the very least, Sia had to pretend that she didn't know. He's also secretly in love with you. If you choose my brother in the end, then Oliver's friendship with him will be over. Have you considered this? Thea enunciated each word clearly. Was there a friendship between Oliver and Death Knell? Judging from the subsequent developments, there was definitely one. Even if Death Knell killed Moira, in Oliver's mind, Death Knell was only bewitched by Mirakuru's drug. Death Knell was still his good brother and friend. It wasn't as if Shadow didn't know about this. She had thought about it before, but when the choice fell into her hands she still panicked. After thinking it over and over again, she really couldn't find a perfect solution. Then there was only one way left for her. After standing silently with her back to Sia for half an hour, she finally made up her mind. Okay, I'll go with you. When? My plane is quite far from here. I'll get it. You can take your father out first. Thea jumped on the skateboard. She flew for about 10 meters before turning back. It's a little hard to say. My subordinates have a human revival experiment. The success rate is only 10%. Do you want to try it? Oh. She felt guilty about experimenting on someone else's father. However, Shadow didn't pay attention to these details. Her mind buzzed. You mean my father can be revived? Thea suddenly thought of it just to increase the reason for her to leave. She nodded and said, it's a kind of biochemical experiment. It's not effective for people who die of natural causes. Your father didn't die of natural causes, did he? Of course not. No one would die of natural causes if they were shot in the head. Shadow's tears flowed uncontrollably. She would try even if it was 1%, let alone 10%. Olivier and whatnot were thrown out of the window. No matter how good a man was, he would never fall into her bowl. She didn't want to think about it anymore. Sia nodded when she saw the drastic change in Shadow's mental state. Then get ready. We're leaving now. The journey back was smooth. When they arrived at their temporary residence, Thea gave Catherine Monroe a call and briefly told her what had happened. This woman was well connected and knew what to say and what not to say. Thea's explanation of the revival project was very vague. Shadow could only assume that it was a secret experiment by the American military. This made her feel uneasy, but at the same time she had a glimmer of hope. No matter what, American technology was so advanced. Perhaps it could really succeed. The court personnel came quickly. They took Shadow and the frozen old Yao to Gotham in a private jet. Before they left, Thea gave Shadow her contact number and warned her that this experiment had a deep background. She told her to be careful when she got there. Of course, it would be better if she pretended to be dumb or blind. I'm finally out. Thea crawled out of the ground like a miner. Her face was covered in dust. It had been 5 days since she parted ways with Olivier and the others and sent Shadow away. Since my brother doesn't want to leave, I'll go treasure hunting. That was what she thought, and that was what she did. In the original novel, Constantine would come to the island in the 4th year to search for a treasure called the Orb of Horus. However, Constantine came with a map. With Olivier leading the way, he found the underground chamber and successfully returned with the treasure. Thea had nothing now. Even if she asked Olivier, it would be useless. The island was too big. There were no signs. Who would know where the treasure was buried? She could only use the stupid method. She sat on the ground and meditated. She used her strong mental power to sense the subtle changes in the magic around her. Fortunately, the island was one of the nodes of the world's magic network. It strengthened her senses to a certain extent. Even so, it took her 3 days to find the exact location. Finding the location didn't mean that she would be able to get the treasure. Constantine looked for a hole and dug a tunnel. Only God knew where the hole was. Thea could only use the stupidest method. She would use brute force and dig a hole. She took out the military shovel that she had prepared and equipped the mechanical arm to dig a hole. She dug through dirt and smashed stones. She didn't have to worry about being discovered on such a deserted island. She also didn't have to worry about disturbing the residents. It took her another 2 days to dig a hole that was 3 meters wide and more than 50 meters deep. It didn't take long for them to see this treasure. The handle was made entirely of gold, and it was 30 centimeters long. There was a light red gem at the top. This was the magic ball of the Egyptian pharaoh's guardian god, Horus. Thea looked at it from afar. The temptation of the inner demons and the guards in full golden armor that she imagined didn't appear. The magic ball was inserted on the altar alone, like a watermelon in an old farmer's field waiting for someone to pick it. Thea remembered that when the magic ball was picked up, a frame full of sharp blades would fall from the top. However, she didn't see any mechanism on the altar. She thought to herself, even if there is a mechanism, I'm not afraid. She looked at the time. It was just nighttime. She shook her shoulder and instructed her clone to do this somewhat dangerous job. But she didn't expect that as soon as her clone put her hand on the magic ball, not to mention picking it up, the moment her skin touched it, the whole underground room collapsed as if it had been hit by a magnitude 18 earthquake. The clone only had time to throw the magic ball to the main body before it was buried under a large number of stones. Hiss! Thea didn't have time to sigh. Under the chain earthquake, the ground under her feet also collapsed. Fortunately, she was prepared. She used her mechanical arm to protect her head. The Kevlar that Batman gave her was also the best, so she didn't suffer any injuries after the collapse. After that, she used her hands and feet to dig herself out. Damn it! There wasn't such a strong reaction in the TV series. Was it because she didn't take the usual path? Or was it because she couldn't use her clone to touch it? Thea couldn't think of an answer. She observed her harvest carefully. The magic ball was divided into two parts, the gem and the handle. She didn't know if this ruby the size of a child's head was personally used by the gods, but it was indeed full of magic, and it was fire magic that matched Thea's affinity. As for the words on the handle, she could see that the words were a spell. However, Thea was a little confused. The words were written in ancient Egyptian. She didn't know if there were 10 people in the modern era who could recognize the words, let alone her. But it was a treasure anyway. She could take it back and study it slowly. It was the age of the internet. What couldn't she find out? Chapter 146. Thea was originally hesitant about finding the statue of the African evil god. In the 4th year, Oliver would help the Sky's Eye Society get the statue, and it would eventually fall into the hands of Damien Dark. Instead of wasting time, it was better to destroy it. But no matter how hard Thea tried, she couldn't find any other source of magic on the island other than the magic ball in her arms. Was it because of the different systems? Or did the statue not have any magic waves? Since she couldn't find it, then so be it. There were still 9 years before Damien's nuclear bomb would wipe out Star City. She could just kill him in advance. She had already completed half of her trip to Purgatory Island, and the remaining task was to rescue Sarah Lance. She didn't have much of a relationship with her, so she didn't have to worry about whether she was willing or not. Once she got her back to Star City, her reputation with her father, Inspector Lance, and Laurel would instantly be worshipped. Thea wouldn't have bothered if it was too far away, but she was on a ship on the other side of the island. Since it was just a matter of convenience, she might as well give her a hand. Thea didn't hesitate. After searching for the magic ball for a few days, the island's environment was no longer as unfamiliar as before. She identified the direction and flew west under the cover of the night. It was difficult to find people, but a large ship on the sea was easy to find. This ship was personally funded by Dr. Ivo, who researched the Japanese biological weapon Mirakuru. He hired a ship of armed mercenaries to find the miracle medicine in his heart. Thea couldn't be bothered to find out what noble reasons he had in the beginning. She only knew that this guy wasn't a good person. She used infrared to observe from a distance. There were quite a lot of thermal reactions on the ship. She roughly estimated that there were hundreds of people on the ship. While the mercenaries were patrolling, Thea landed lightly on the deck. The skateboard wasn't suitable for movement in the narrow cabin. She needed to move as fast as lightning. She held the necklace that Malcolm gave her and whispered the spell on it. Wind walk. Following the successful casting of the spell, a circle of green smoke could be seen surrounding her body. She adjusted to the sudden increase in speed. Not bad. Although it wasn't as fast as the Flash, it was still close to 600 kilometers per hour. After some hesitation, he put the skateboard back into his bag. The interior of the ship was small, so he should not encounter any strong resistance. Using the stealth techniques of the Union of Assassins, he entered the cabin through the shadows when a few patrol teams met. Along the way, he knocked out a lone mercenary. Regardless of whether the mercenary would become an idiot or not, he activated suggestion and dream entering at full power. His powerful spiritual power directly crushed the mercenary's memory. Thea quickly grasped the situation of the ship. There were not as many mercenaries as she had imagined. There were only 2 small teams of 50 people. Dr. Evo had brought a small team to search the island this morning, so there were only 25 people left on the ship. As for the thermal reactions that Thea observed, most of them were from prisoners that Dr. Aiwa had captured and used for human experiments. Sarah Lance was doing well. Although she was only a beauty in Thea's eyes, She was a great beauty in the eyes of Dr. Aiwa, who had drifted on the sea for a few years. They had feelings for each other. After a few hookups, Sarah became Dr. Aiwa's personal secretary. Knowing that there were not many people on the ship, Thea naturally did not continue to hide her tracks. There were only a few rotten fish and shrimps scattered throughout the ship. What was there to be afraid of? She summoned her doppelganger and handed her the bow and arrow. Her meaning was clear. If she saw them, kill them. If not, forget it. The real body drew out a long sword and a dagger. Seeing a patrol team in the distance, she rushed over like a gust of wind. These people might be considered elites in the eyes of ordinary people, but in the eyes of Thea, who was fast and powerful, and whose fighting skills were at the top of the world, they were full of flaws. She slashed left and right, and every time she waved her weapon, a strong man would fall to the ground. The doppelganger also drew the bow and shot at the mercenaries who had picked up their weapons and were ready to fight back. The battle ended in a short 30 seconds. Thea shook off the blood on the spine of her sword. The real body killed 5 and the doppelganger killed 3. Not a single one of them can fight. The real body's complacent remark made the doppelganger roll its eyes. The doppelganger raised its bow and arrow. Go and start the fight. I'm a long-range fighter. Like looking into a mirror, they teased each other for a while. Thea was surprised to find that the doppelganger was especially active at night. She seemed to be able to absorb energy from the killing. Her originally stiff expression became much more lively. Does this mean that I have to be the light emissary during the day and kill at night? My talent is really strange. Will it really not split after a long time? Then another patrol team was wiped out. Thea followed the memory that she had read and found the captain's room. The iron gate was tightly locked, and it looked very sturdy. Thea could not go up and shout that there was a delivery. Open the door quickly. She could only turn on the power of the mechanical arm and punch at the suspected keyhole. Poof! There was a crisp sound, but the expected earthquake did not happen. The door looked sturdy, but it was actually a layer of iron that could be pierced through with a light poke. Thea's punch was so powerful that it took down the entire door along with its frame. Ah! A scream rang through the room. Sarah Lance had been sleeping well in the captain's room. The conditions here were naturally not as good as at home, but happiness came from comparison. Compared to the experimental subjects who were waiting to die in the cage, she had reached the top in a single bound. Dr. Evo did not make any excessive demands of her. In fact, even if he did, she would not dare to resist. She thought that her days would go on like this, but she did not expect to hear so many screams in her sleep. At first, she thought it was a dream, but when the thick smell of blood rushed into her nose, she knew it was not a dream. Just as she was feeling uneasy, all the screams disappeared. She could only hear light footsteps outside the door. When Sarah was about to hide, a silver-white metal arm outside the door broke through the cabin door with a poof. Under her horrified gaze, the entire cabin door was removed. At this moment, all she could do was scream. Countless movie clips appeared in her mind, such as Terminator, Alien, and so on. Of course, she was not playing the role of the Terminator. She was the female pig-trotter who was scared to the point of peeing her pants. Thea swaggered into the room and saw Sarah, who was trembling all over with her eyes closed. She was speechless. Was she that scary? She had to admit that her voice was really loud. No wonder she could get the mixed account of White Canary. But she was here to save her. She recalled her doppelganger. She could not let her see these things. Hey, I'm here to save you. After waiting for 3 seconds, Sarah did not hear her at all. She shouted so loudly that Thea's voice was completely covered. After all, she was someone she knew. Whether it was Oliver, Laurel, or Inspector Lance, it was not appropriate to directly beat her up and kidnap her. Thea could only be patient and listen to her shouting. She didn't know if the remaining mercenaries on the ship were frightened by her murderous aura, or if they were jealous that Sarah had suddenly become the captain's subordinate and above 50 people. Either way, no one was prepared to rescue the captain's little lover, and they all hid in a corner and pretended to be dead. Chapter 147. Thea found a chair and sat on it with her legs crossed. The corner of her mouth twitched. She thought to herself, I'm going to ignore you. Let's see how long you can howl for. Sarah Lance's mind was blank. She thought about being dismembered by the enemy, and wondered if the enemy had taken out a gun. She was scaring herself. thinking that she only had a few seconds left in this world. She should make full use of it and continue to scream. But when her voice was hoarse, she realized that something was wrong. She was going to be a heroine in the future, so her basic intelligence was still online. There seems to be only my voice in the room. Where's the enemy? Was he knocked out by my scream? She opened her eyes a little. No one. The enemy ran away. Sarah Lance was overjoyed. She opened her eyes and let out a sigh of relief. But when she turned her head, she almost bit her tongue when she saw Thea sitting on the chair. You. Sarah pointed at Thea's face and thought. At this time, Thea took off her hood and revealed her face. She should know her. After all, it had only been a year, so her appearance wouldn't change too much. But it was hard to say. At least Thea didn't have much of an impression of her. Fortunately, she was arrogant in the past, but people still paid attention to her. You are? You're Ollie's sister? Sarah felt that the woman in front of her looked familiar. She slapped her forehead and tried to recall. Finally, she found a clue from Ollie. Isn't this his sister? As for her name, Sarah couldn't remember. She sighed. Thea Quinn. I'm here to save you. Your father and sister miss you very much. She reached out a hand and pulled Sarah up from the floor. This girl didn't look tall, but she had a lot of meat on her body. Perhaps the food on the ship was too good, but she was chubby. Fortunately, Thea had been exercising for a long time. If she was the skinny girl from before, she wouldn't have been able to pull her up. Sarah was still drowning in her longing for her father and guilt for her sister. She stood up and realized that she was being pulled out of the door. Where are we going? Where are the guards? Don't worry. Everyone on this ship is hiding. Go to the island and find my plane. I'll send you back to Star City. Suddenly hearing the familiar name of Star City, Sarah's tears flowed down uncontrollably. Thea frowned. This woman was too emotional. To be honest, Thea admired Sarah Lance's future achievements. Whether she was the captain of the Wave Rider or the leader of the legendary squad, Sarah Lance was a great heroine, relying on his own continuous struggles to repair the changes in the timeline, especially the phrase "legends never admit defeat," that left a deep impression on everyone. Compared to the Flash on the other side, Sarah's reverence for time was 10,000 times higher than his. The Flash had triggered the Flashpoint incident and rewritten the fates of countless people, just to rewrite his own childhood misfortune. But that was the future. Thea could only say that heroes were created by circumstances, and that no one was born outstanding. Only heroes who worked hard to fight against fate were worthy of praise. Sarah only recovered a little when they were really out of the range of the ship. Her father's nagging and her sister's complaints were nothing. As long as she could leave this damn island, she would even beat her up. At this time, not far from the two of them, a wave of blue light appeared in the air. After a violent wave, a man and a woman walked out of the air. The short blonde woman was very alert, but when she looked around, her face was full of disbelief. Purgatory Island? The tall man on the side heard her call and looked around carefully. This is the Purgatory Island that you and Oliver stayed in? Why did Gideon send us here? Shouldn't we be in the Star City police station in 2007? The two of them were speechless. They could only silently get up and walk into the darkness. What is this thing? When Thea was installing the skateboard, Sarah's brain had returned to normal. She asked a lot of questions like where was Ollie, how was her family, and so on. Thea could only answer a few selectively. It's installed, Just when Thea was about to jump on, she suddenly felt her temple throbbing. A strong sense of danger surged in her heart. She could only see a blue light flying toward her. Get down! He pounced on Sarah Lance, who was still looking at him in a daze. The blue light didn't hit them, but under Thea's horrified gaze, it pierced through the skateboard. God! The skateboard that was floating in the air was like a kite with a broken string. It wobbled and fell to the ground, never to move again. F***ck your mother. Thea was instantly filled with anger. She turned her head to look at the culprit. Not far away stood a tall woman in black clothes with black hair and a blank expression. Who was this? Why would such a person suddenly appear on Purgatory Island at this time? But before she could open her mouth to ask, the weapon in the woman's hand started firing non-stop. Swoosh! 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 Rays of blue light shot towards Thea and Sarah. Laser weapon? Thea was a little confused. There weren't such high-end weapons in this era. The Batfighter was considered the pinnacle of human technology, but it hadn't entered the laser era. Could it be that this person was an alien? The situation was grim. No matter who the opponent was or where she came from, the fact that she was an enemy was undeniable. After whispering to Sarah to hide, Thea raised her hand and cast a dark magic. She didn't need to trap the opponent. She only needed to temporarily interfere with the enemy's vision. Then, under Sarah's shocked gaze, Thea cast the wind-walking spell on herself again. The distance of 100 meters was covered in an instant. Facing the enemy who had just escaped from the black fog, she raised her hand and slashed. Thea's speed was very fast. In just a few dozen moves she had completely gained the upper hand. She found that the woman's fighting ability was far inferior to hers. At best, she was at the level of a special forces soldier. But she was very strong and her body was very sturdy. Her sword that could cut iron like mud could only leave scratches on her body. Her body was so dense? She shouldn't be an earthling, right? She didn't know. While she was puzzled, the woman opposite her was also extremely surprised. She kept thinking in her heart, who was this woman fighting with her? She didn't seem to be the target of her mission. Two people who shouldn't be at this time appeared in a place where they shouldn't be and inexplicably fought. This was completely different from her initial plan. But as the fight went on, her anger also rose. Thea's sword slashed her body more than a dozen times. Although the cuts weren't deep, she was not a robot. She would still bleed. Relying on her strength that was far greater than that of an earthling, she didn't pursue small fights. Instead, she used strong punches. Seeing that she changed her attack style, Thea didn't dare to take it head-on. She deliberately exposed a flaw. The woman in black was overjoyed. She ignored the sword that was going to pierce her collarbone and punched Thea's face. Chapter 148. I was waiting for you to use this move. Thea's mechanical arm was already equipped, but it was hidden under the combat suit and could not be seen by outsiders. Now that she saw the punch that she thought was effective, she sneered in her heart. Aren't you just relying on your strength? I'll let you see what science is. She raised her hand and punched out. The woman in black saw that Thea was about to punch her, and her heart tightened. Is this woman from Earth really powerful? But the arrow was already on the bow, so she could only use her greatest strength to punch out. Bang! With a muffled sound, the woman in black felt an overwhelming force rushing from her arm to her shoulder. His entire body was knocked off the ground and flew back more than 5 meters. Damn it! How can this woman be so powerful? The woman in black was well trained. She turned around in the air and regained her balance. Her eyes kept rolling as she tried to figure out the enemy's plan. Thea was quite satisfied with this punch. She had already used all the available power in her arm. Although the maximum power in the design was 10 tons, considering the way the human body exerted force and the recoil, the actual power could not reach that high. However, this punch still contained more than 5 tons of strength. Although the woman in black was also known for her great strength, she was at most at the level of 1 to 2 tons, which was similar to the non-berserk Bane. Now that she was caught off guard, her arm was numb from Thea's punch, and her strength had decreased by at least 20%. Although Thea also suffered some recoil, the excellent shock-absorbing performance of the metal arm almost eliminated this force. She took half a step back and attacked the woman in black while she regained her balance. Who are you? The woman in black felt that this fight was not clear. Thea immediately asked, Tell me who you are first. I can't tell you. Tell me who you are. We must have misunderstood. The woman in black's fighting skills were not as good as Thea's, and now she was at a disadvantage in terms of strength and speed. She was beaten by Thea like a dog. Now you know it's a misunderstanding? Where's the energy you used to shoot my skateboard? You still want to know my name. Is it for revenge in the future? I'll never change my name or surname. I'm Barbara Gordon. Thea announced her name casually without any embarrassment. Her expression was so calm that it was a mess. Achoo! Barbara, who was thousands of miles away, didn't know that she had taken the blame and was still receiving special training from Batman. She couldn't help but sneeze. The woman in black was naturally not a magnanimous person. She muttered the name twice in a low voice. Barbara. Humph, I'll remember this. Although she was furious she couldn't beat him. She didn't have the ability to recall the memories of the main characters, so she didn't have that ability even if she wanted to. Seeing Thea's vicious punch coming towards her face, she became anxious. "You're so strong, wouldn't that punch disfigure me?" If he could tolerate this, what else could he do? He couldn't care less about the rules of the organization. Time stop. The woman in black raised her right hand and aimed it at Thea. An invisible field shrouded the place where the two were fighting. At this time, Thea maintained her right hand in front of her and her left arm in the air. She was completely unconscious and didn't realize what was happening. The woman in black gasped for breath. She could only change the flow of time in a small area temporarily. It was impossible to stop the entire world. However, even such a small area brought about a huge backlash. No one could deceive time. They were only the servants of time, not the masters. Next, she was ready to complete her mission and retreat quickly. However, she discovered a shocking fact. Thea, who was theoretically frozen by the flow of time, was moving slowly. Although the distance she moved was extremely small, she wasn't completely imprisoned. This guy. The woman in black was completely dumbfounded. This phenomenon could only mean that this guy who was fighting with her wasn't a nobody. She was an important person in this timeline. Countless people could have direct or indirect contact with her. Under the influence of these people, there was an even greater change in time. Instead of saying that she was imprisoning her, it was more accurate to say that she was fighting for control of the entire timeline. Let alone her. Even if she pulled out the 180 people in the organization and multiplied it by 10,000, they still wouldn't be able to go against the laws of this world. It sounded like a long time, but in reality only a second had passed. However, this short second had caused the black-clothed woman's vitality to be greatly damaged. Her originally pretty appearance was like that of an evil spirit, and her body also uncontrollably shriveled up. No, the backlash of time was too great. She had to stop immediately. She would rather be beaten to death than use this move. However, she underestimated the tolerance of time and overestimated her own limits. Halfway through her action, a huge amount of energy exploded from within her body. The explosion of energy was so quick and violent that it was shocking. Without even making a sound, the woman in black was blown to smithereens on the spot. This wasn't an adjective, it was reduced to an atomic structure. However, because the imprisonment field wasn't immediately removed, some strange substances in her body automatically entered Thea's body. With the woman's death, her time field was naturally removed, and Thea also smoothly regained control of her body. However, the scene in front of her made her a little confused. Although she was imprisoned, her memory was still there. The scene in front of her was that she jumped up and attacked, and then the woman in black was instantly blown to smithereens. Did I do this? Thea was confused. Did I hit her? Was she killed by my punch? Was she possessed by Saito-sensei? However, the enemy was indeed dead. Although many villains had the tradition of faking their deaths, as long as their heads weren't chopped off, this woman was already smithereens. In theory, it was impossible for her to revive, right? Carefully feeling her body, she vaguely felt that there was something extra in her body, but she couldn't identify it without a reference. At the same time, in the grass not far from her, two people were whispering. "What do you think we should do?" Thea killed the Time Wanderer. She's going to take my original body back to Star City. What was it? The blonde woman in white leather couldn't say what it was. The tall man named Rem had a funny look on his face. "I'm a doctor of physics, not time travel. However, this Thea is very different from the Thea we know." The blonde woman rolled her eyes at him, knowing that he couldn't give any constructive advice. Just as she was racking her brains for a solution, their communicator rang. "Miss Lance, Dr. Palmer, the timeline shows that Wanderer is dead. Did you do it?" The owner of the voice found it hard to believe, but his tone was very relaxed. The two in the grass looked at each other and smiled bitterly. They wanted to accept this glory, but they really didn't do it. Chapter 149. The two of them came up with no good ideas, so they decided to go back and discuss it. But when they moved, Thea immediately sensed them. Even when she was a pure martial artist, Thea was astonishingly sensitive, not to mention now that she had evolved into psychic power. "Who's there?" The sound of their footsteps instantly alerted Thea. Relying on the support of the wind walk spell on her body, She glided over to the two of them like a flying dragon, her feet barely touching the ground. But when Thea saw the faces of the two people clearly, she was instantly dumbfounded. The blonde girl was Sarah Lance, and the tall, handsome and funny guy next to her was Ray Palmer? Why were they here? At this time at this place? Thea vaguely understood something. She used her psychic power to sense Sarah Lance, who was knocked out by the shockwave. That's right, there were two Sarahs. The one in front of her was Sarah Lance from the future. Hi, I'm Ray. You don't know me. Oh, at least not now. No, I mean you shouldn't know me now. The handsome Ray Palmer, who was 1.9 meters tall, ignored the mysterious atmosphere between the two women and greeted them in a relaxed and cheerful manner. But after a few words he found it more and more ridiculous, so he stopped talking. But he still stared at her with bright eyes. This guy was indeed Felicity's boyfriend. He was just as funny as she was. Thea pursed her lips and nodded reluctantly. Then she turned to the blonde girl who was silent. You're Sarah. Sarah Lance, who already had the demeanor of a future legendary captain, bit her lip and said helplessly, Yes, you. Why are you on Purgatory Island? I'm here to find Oliver. Thea answered firmly and reasonably. No one could find fault with it. Sarah was having a headache. Naturally, she couldn't find any fault with the answer. Just as she was racking her brains, Captain Rip Hunter's voice came from the communicator. Hold her down for now. We'll be right there. Sarah and Ray exchanged glances and decided to let the Atom Man, who was more talkative, buy time. Hey, where were we? Oh yes, you don't know me yet, but you will soon. Blah blah blah. Thea didn't see their secretive gazes, but she didn't feel that these two guys were a threat to her. After all, they were on the same side. Ray used to be Felicity's boyfriend, and Sarah was Laurel's sister. She was related to them in many ways. Seeing that they had the intention to chat about their daily lives, even though she was a little confused, she still started to talk nonsense with him. Unfortunately, Ray Palmer was the kind of person who could talk nonsense all day long, but was always unreliable at crucial moments. After a few sentences, he could not continue. Thea saw through his intentions, but she didn't expose him. Instead, she changed the topic and discussed with him about physics, technology, and nanotechnology. This made Ray Palmer breathe a sigh of relief. For an authority in quantum mechanics who could solve the Ehrenfest theorem in an hour, he could talk about science and technology for 3 days and 3 nights without repeating himself. What a genius! Although many of his ideas were just general discussions, they still made Thea's eyes light up. This guy could be seen as a weakened version of Tony Stark. Just a simple conversation between the two had benefited Thea a lot. Just as Ray was explaining a formula to her, Thea smiled. Your friends are here. We mean no harm, Sarah quickly explained. Yeah. Ray Palmer nodded like a chicken pecking at rice. Whether or not they meant harm, they would only know when they met. Thea looked at the people opposite her who didn't hide their tracks and rushed towards her. A strange feeling arose in her heart. Was she so strong that she needed to team up to fight? She was so happy. Happy my ass. She didn't get any experience or reputation from fighting these people. 5 people came from afar. The one in the lead was the captain of Wave Rider, Rip Hunter, who was wearing a long brown windbreaker. On his left was Captain Frigid, who was wearing a down jacket and sunglasses and holding a slightly exaggerated-looking gun. Next to him was Captain Frigid's good partner, Heatwave, who was wearing an asbestos fireproof suit and holding a flamethrower. On his right was an ordinary-looking black youth with thick lips. Thea couldn't remember his name. Beside him was a fat old man with white hair and round glasses. Was the whole Tomorrow's Legend squad coming out? No, there should also be Hawkman and Hawkgirl. Were those 2 idiots dead or not? Miss Quinn, we're not enemies. We mean you no harm. Rip Hunter was the first to speak, explaining his side's position. Thea believed in this. Although her brother Oliver was a weakling now, his reputation would still shock many people in the future. He was known as the 8th magnate outside of the 7 magnate of the Righteous Alliance. As his sister, she would definitely have a good reputation in the Justice faction. They wouldn't dare to harm her. Seeing that she didn't overreact, Rip Hunt silently sighed in relief. It was inevitable to run into relatives and friends while traveling through time, so he couldn't just kill every single one of them. If he really did that, even the heroes of justice wouldn't spare them, so he was very experienced in dealing with such sudden incidents. His faction was neutral and even leaned towards the righteous alliance. Naturally, he couldn't force Thea, who had a close relationship with the Green Arrow Party. We came here from a certain time in the future. We wanted to stop the Time Wanderer from making a move on Miss Sarah's past, but we didn't expect to meet you here. I hope you can hand Miss Sarah, Rip Hunter pointed at the fainted Sarah Lance in the distance, to us and let her return to her original time. Thea had never thought about the broad issue of time changing Sarah's fate. She thought about it carefully. Wouldn't it be better to send Sarah back to Star City, to her father and sister? Yes, that's great. There was nothing wrong with that at all. From every angle, Purgatory Island was the beginning of Sarah's tragic fate. If it could be changed from the beginning, then it wouldn't be a bad thing. But Rip Hunt couldn't say that. A person's perspective was different from his or her own. From Sarah's point of view, changing everything would definitely be a good thing. In fact, it would be an extremely good thing. If she could return home and live happily ever after, who would be willing to suffer so much? But for Rip Hunter, it was a bit of a headache. Sarah was someone he had focused on nurturing. She had brains, potential, and enough decisiveness. But all of that came from the suffering she had endured. If he agreed to let Sarah go home, she wouldn't have any of those experiences. Wouldn't he be looking for trouble if he recruited her? Rip could swear to the heavens that as long as he let Sarah go, the capable blonde girl in front of him would instantly turn into a powerless young girl. Changing boyfriends twice a month, having some pox on the weekends, and having parties when she was bored. This was the norm for young Americans. If he could maintain Sarah's original life path, it would be this image. But he couldn't say a single word of that. He could only rely on Sarah's own wishes. Whether his right-hand woman wanted to live her current life or return to the past was all up to her. Chapter 150. In the end, the choice was back to Sarah. Of course, it was the future version of Sarah in front of them. The unconscious weakling in the distance was automatically ignored by them. What should I do? Even with Sarah's extraordinary decisiveness, she was still somewhat hesitant. If she nodded, all her suffering would end, and she would return to her daily life. What Assassin's League or Legendary Team? To hell with it. If she shook her head, everything would go back to normal, and she would still have to continue struggling in this sea of suffering. Everyone was silent for a moment. Those who understood lowered their heads in deep thought. When the problem fell on their heads, how should they choose? Those who didn't understand were also looking around, wondering why no one spoke. Sarah opened her mouth and couldn't continue after that one word. Perhaps she herself was in extreme hesitation. You shouldn't become a weakling, Sarah Lance. You're an assassin, a fighter against fate. Think about the true meaning of your existence. Beside her, Captain Cold Snart said with a sharp duck-like voice. The originally fluctuating balance had a subtle change because of his words. Sarah's expression gradually changed from hesitation to determination. She closed her eyes and said with a pained voice, "You're right. That's my fate. I shouldn't run away from it." Thea couldn't help but glance at this guy who suddenly interrupted. This person's overall aura was sinister, which intuitively made Thea uncomfortable. She didn't think that he could understand Sarah's heart so well. In her impression, one of them was gay while the other was a lesbian. Unexpectedly, they had developed feelings for each other. She really didn't expect that their hearts would be linked so early. Since you've chosen this path, I can't drag you back. Thea nodded at her, indicating that they could solve it on their own. With one problem solved, Rip Hunt, who had a beautiful beard, felt a huge weight lifted off his heart. But immediately a new problem emerged. He reached into his pocket and took out a capsule, saying awkwardly, "Miss Quinn, we're time travelers. You'll know us in the future, but not now. So you have to take this pill and forget what you've experienced today." Ha ha. Thea covered her mouth and laughed in anger. Just because you think I'm easy to talk to, you think I'm a pushover? Time traveler? I'm so scared. I'm dying of laughter. Thea was laughing so hard that her body was trembling. However, under the puzzled gazes of the others, her face instantly turned ashen. "Are you sure you want me dead?" Rip Hunter tried to mediate for the last time. "We don't want to be your enemy, but these are our rules." "Humph." Thea snorted. "Do you give everyone you meet pills? How is that possible? Our spaceship is a time-traveling spaceship, not a pharmaceutical factory." If we were to give one to everyone we see, we would have to work 3 shifts a day and not do anything else. Rip Hunter shook his head. We don't want to do that. We respect Green Arrow a lot, but you need to know that there are 7 of us. Hearing his threatening words, Thea smiled contemptuously. So what if there were 7 of them? They were just chickens and dogs. He drew his bow and aimed at Rip Hunt, who was threatening him. Although this guy spoke of saving the world's peace, it was actually all for the sake of saving his wife and child. Saving one's wife and child wasn't shameful at all. In fact, it was a very noble act. However, in order to cover up this fact, he dressed himself up as the savior of the world. Perhaps he didn't even realize how fake his words and actions were. As she drew her bow and shot an arrow, the others had no choice but to join the battle. What abilities does she have? The gloomy Captain Lung asked the so-called acquaintance of Thea, Sarah Lance. She was the one who interacted with Green Arrow's party the most. She's Malcolm's daughter. Her training is similar to mine. Although Sarah had seen Thea fight with the Time Wanderer, she was a bit far away at the time. Thea didn't display much supernatural power, so she could only describe it based on what she knew. So that's a normal person with extraordinary skills? Heatwave shook his head, his face full of disdain. Rip Hunter said in a low voice, "Don't hurt her. She's an important person in the timeline. Don't worry. We can take care of her with our fists and feet." The Ice and Fire duo silently put away their weapons and rushed out. The rest of them also ran towards Thea. As they ran, they finished changing. Ray Palmer took out a small box from his pocket. The atomic suit instantly enlarged and he put it on. The black guy and the white fat old man clasped their right hands together and combined to become the superhero Firestorm. Although Sarah didn't want to be Thea's enemy, she still took out her iron rod and pretended to run. Thea was a bit speechless at their formation. 7 people. Fine 1 person. Now there were 6. The 6 of them ran in a row like European soldiers from the age of matchlocks. From a visual point of view, they were indeed intimidating. The 6 of them were like fierce tigers or dragons coming out of the sea. But this isn't a photography competition. This is a combat competition. You're standing so close together that Thea was embarrassed to attack. But since she didn't want to take advantage of them, Thea decided to teach them a lesson. The name of the lesson was Mom, We'll Never Group Together Again. Her right hand released the bowstring and drew a few mysterious runes in the air. This was her modified illumination spell based on the dark mist spell. The starting movements and ending sounds were exactly the same. She just needed to change the rhythmic runes in the middle from dark to light. With the help of the sun rune's strong light affinity, Thea released this modified spell in less than a second. The light attribute was known for its speed. Thea raised her hand and threw the glowing ball at Rip Hunter, who was running at the front. The ball of light instantly exploded around them. The originally beautiful formation immediately fell apart. What's that? A flash bomb? Thea didn't have the obligation to explain it to them. She quickly shot out a binding arrow. They didn't want to shoot the rat for fear of breaking the vases. She couldn't kill them directly either, so she could only use a skill to stun and blind them. Under this kind of unprepared situation, the difference between an ordinary hero and a hero with superpowers could be seen. Rip Hunter lived up to his name. With a very ridiculous posture, he was caught in the net without even making a sound. He reflexively struggled a few times, but the result was that the net became even stronger. He naturally couldn't withstand the chemical agent that could stun even Bane. In less than 10 seconds he was GG. Heatwave, who was also rushing fiercely, was in the same situation as him. He came into close contact with the spiderweb. As an arsonist, the first thing he thought of when he saw the spiderweb was to burn it. But he didn't have a weapon with him. Even if he did, he wouldn't dare. He was still hanging on the net. He could only turn his head to his partner, Captain Cold, for help. Captain Cold, who was known to be able to fight against the Flash with his ordinary physique, had amazing reflexes. Perhaps his sunglasses also provided some protection, so he was less affected by the strong light. He could vaguely see Thea shooting an arrow, so he slowed down a little and avoided the fate of being caught in the net. Chapter 151. Sarah, on the other hand, was very lucky. She started late and was the closest to Thea among all the people present, not to mention that Thea had come all the way here to save her in 2008. She couldn't bite the hand that fed her. She seemed to be rushing out with the team, but in fact she was still far away from Thea. The ball of light did not explode in front of her, and she used the heatwave to avoid most of the glaring light. Although it was more or less uncomfortable, she still saw the dense cobwebs and nimbly avoided them. Ray Palmer was usually very funny, but his atomic suit was not for show. The moment the spider webs were about to hit him, he shrank and passed through them. The remaining firestorm seemed to be a combination of two people. His brain was a little messed up and he rolled his eyes every day. It was not the supercilious eyes in anime, nor was it the adjective supercilious eyes. It was purely the action of rolling the black eyeballs to reveal the white eyeballs. Thea did not understand how they could receive retinal signals like this. Anyway, she knew that her flash did not work on them. The combined guy was on fire and went straight through the center of the spider webs, leaving a human-shaped hole. Captain Lung hesitated on the outermost side, wondering whether he should save his partner first or gang up on Thea first. Sarah did not want to fight at all. She pretended to be an 80-year-old woman and slowly moved forward. In the end, the only ones who rushed in front of Thea were the Atom Man and the combined firestorm. Both of them were strong opponents, and Thea did not dare to take them lightly. However, their fighting styles were not mature enough. The Atom Man's personal chivalry was too strong. He had a long-range weapon on his suit, but he insisted on fighting hand-to-hand. If a bookworm with several doctorates and a contemporary grandmaster of martial arts like Thea fought hand-to-hand, the result was already doomed. Thea didn't pay much attention to him and dealt with him casually. Her attention was always on the firestorm in the sky and Captain Lung Han, who was rushing over from afar. Firestorm's flying ability was quite fast, but he mostly used the reverse thrust of the flames to accelerate his flight. It looked like two streaks of flames flitting through the air, mighty and domineering, but in fact, his steering was extremely poor. If Thea's skateboard was still there was no way she could beat him up. Dr. Palmer, is your suit sturdy? Thea dodged Firestorm's air-to-ground fireball and asked Atom Man with a smile. Of course my battle suit is made of. Before he could finish his sentence, Thea's mechanical arm went into overdrive and grabbed one of his arms. Like a discus, she spun 3 times on the spot and threw it at the firestorm in the air. The black guy and the fat old man were not very smart. When they saw Atom Man flying at them, they reached out to catch him without thinking. Thea had been waiting for this moment. There were many problems with their combination. The black guy and the fat old man's cooperation was always half a beat slower. In the original plot, there was a glorious failure where they were shot apart by an arrow. Coincidentally, the arrow was shot by none other than Malcolm Merlin, Thea's biological father. Of course, in the current timeline, they hadn't met Old Ma yet, so they didn't realize how big the problem was with their seemingly cool combination. Thea found the right landing point and shot the arrow right in the chest of Firestorm. There was a momentary pause in the communication between the two of them. One of them wanted to run to the left, and the other desperately dodged to the right. As a result, the two of them withdrew from the combination state with blank faces. Fortunately, Atom Man was on the side and gave them a hand. Otherwise, they would have been crippled. The two of them fell to the ground a little angrily. When they tried to combine again, they found that their hands were swollen and there was no sign of fusion. Thea looked at this scene from the corner of her eyes and felt relieved. Super speed, super conversion ability, and a body strength and damage reduction ability that far surpassed Superman. So balanced in all aspects, do you think you are Superman? There must be a limit to so many abilities. Otherwise, if you are so strong, how can others play with you? Thea had expected that the combination would have a cooldown. Since they couldn't combine, the threat to Thea instantly decreased from the biggest to the smallest. She turned her head and looked at White Canary Sarah Lance, who finally ran over. It's so strange. You are much stronger than the Thea I remember. Sarah, who was determined to stop killing, said with a puzzled expression. At this moment, Thea didn't display any supernatural abilities. They thought that the flashing spell from before was a flash bomb. After that, she also used a bow to deal with them. Although Sarah didn't see any clues, her intuition told her that Thea in front of her was fully capable of killing her. Hearing her question, Thea rolled her eyes. How refreshing. Do you think I'm the Eagle Hero and Eagle Girl who are still weak even after being reborn 206 times? Those two are a disgrace to all reborn people. Thea couldn't be bothered to explain. She silently raised her hand and made an inviting gesture. Speaking of which, I haven't fought with you before. Judging from your movements, it seems to be the martial arts of the Assassins' Alliance. So, you and Malcolm have reunited? Sarah constantly adjusted her pace and at the same time analyzed why Thea was so strong. According to her timeline, Thea should still be in Star City. But when she saw Thea's movement, she instantly understood. So that's why. She and Malcolm had reunited in advance. Thinking that she had found a reasonable explanation for the timeline's distortion, Sarah felt much more at ease. Thea neither admitted nor refuted Sarah's conjecture. Those were all trivial matters. It was rare to meet a pure earthling who didn't have any messy abilities or technological equipment. Thea also put away her bow and secretly deactivated her mechanical arm. She wanted to face this legendary team leader who had surpassed her master in a fair fight. Both of them drew their swords, greeted each other, and began to duel according to the rules of the Alliance. This battle was far less intense than the last time with Talia. Neither of them had the intention to kill. Thea was stronger than Sarah in terms of height, combat skills, strength, and speed, but she didn't have an overwhelming advantage. At first, Sarah thought that she could defeat Thea with her experience, but she soon realized that Thea was more experienced than she was. On the contrary, because of her experience as a legendary team, she had to deal with laser guns, primitive people, and aliens every day. It had been a long time since she fought with a master of the same level. The two of them exchanged 7 or 8 moves, and her offensive was gradually suppressed. Thea was too familiar with her martial arts. Her level was far inferior to Old Ma and Talia, and naturally she couldn't be compared to the current Thea. But out of admiration for her future bravery, Thea didn't go all out. She was prepared to end the battle with a draw. As Thea deliberately went easy on Sarah, the situation was reversed a bit. The Atom Man on the side stared at them with a pair of big eyes. It was not until Captain Frostbite shouted, "Sarah, let me help you," that he realized that he was still in combat mode. His body was sluggish and he also ran up to attack. Chapter 152. The three of them seemed to have the advantage in numbers, but it was no different from before. Captain Frosty's freeze gun couldn't be used, so he could only pull out a dagger for close combat. The Atom Man, on the other hand, was more of a hindrance. He was 1.9 meters tall, and with his battle suit, he blocked their line of sight, which made the short Sarah stomp her feet in anger. The fat old man and the black guy were cheering them on from afar, which made Thea laugh. As expected, heroes on the side of justice were more or less funny. If they were Gotham villains, they would have run away by now. Thinking of running away, Thea was also ready to retreat. It wasn't that she couldn't beat them, but that there was no point in fighting them. It wasn't appropriate to win or lose, so she had to take care of their reputation. He kicked Captain Frosty away and grabbed Sarah's arm in front of him to block Atom Man's fist. Thea threw a Batman smoke grenade. Bang! The smoke grenade was specially made by her master, and no infrared or thermal imaging could see through it. It was the best escape tool in the DC world. Where is he? Where is he? The Atom Man, who was wearing an X-ray helmet, looked left and right. Everything was white, and when the smoke dissipated, they were the only ones left. None of these people were injured, which was a good thing, but the two people on the net were in a bad mood. The more they struggled, the harder they got stuck. Rip had already fainted, while the rough man's heatwave physique was better than most people, so he was barely conscious, but his face was currently covered in white cobwebs, which made him look quite pitiful. Although they didn't have Thea's escape potion, Ray Palmer and the fat old man were the world's top scientists. After some analysis, they still rescued Rip Hunt and Heatwave. He did come down, but Rip Hunt's cool beige trench coat and his Heatwave army green fireproof suit were completely stuck to the ground and couldn't be removed. Heatwave was so angry that he took out his flamethrower and sprayed the cobwebs until his clothes were burned to ashes. Only then did he walk back angrily. The few of them were a little dejected. Thea did not appear to be very strong, but she was able to crush them as easily as crushing dry weeds. This made them doubt whether they could save the world in the future. That's right. A follower hero from Green Arrow's team could beat the 7 of them to such a state. Wouldn't a guy stronger than Green Arrow be able to kill them in minutes? Rip Hunter had lost his windbreaker and was only left with a shirt. His entire aura instantly changed from that of a rich and handsome man to that of a poor loser. But he didn't have the time to ponder over his image. He turned to the AI on the console and asked, "Gideon." "I'm here, Captain." A light blue 3D holographic projection appeared on the console. The mouth of the 3D person seemed to be opening and closing as he replied calmly, "Gideon, help me find out which timeline the Time Walker is in. We have to save everyone before she does." The light blue figure was silent for a while, as if he had gone through a careful examination. "Captain, the Time Walker did not appear at any point in the past, future, or present." "What do you mean?" Rip Hunter was a little confused. "Captain, according to tradition, the Time Walker is already dead. She no longer exists. She has been completely obliterated, leaving no trace behind in the timeline." "How could that be?" Rip Hunter was a little dumbfounded. He wasn't like those heroes of justice who didn't understand the situation. As a member of the Time Master Council, he knew that the Time Walker was the #1 assassin under the control of the Council. Now this #1 assassin had just shown her face and hadn't even done anything before she was killed by a passing hero in a few punches and kicks. Isn't your #1 a little too weak? Or was it that the heroes of the main plane were all very strong, and the Time Master Council was just a bunch of frogs at the bottom of a well, closing their doors every day to proclaim themselves as #1 in the world? This bunch of weaklings. Rip Hunter's impression of the organization he used to be loyal to was becoming more and more unfavorable. The people they trained were too weak. For a moment he didn't even know what to do. The Time Walker's way of doing things was simple and crude. Find a point in time before the members of a Legends team made a name for themselves and kill them in advance. According to Rip's original plan, he would have been one step ahead and pulled back all the members' precursors to protect them. But now that the assassins were all dead, there was no point in protecting them anymore. He turned to Sarah and asked, "Which point in time do you plan to send your past to?" Although Sarah was a bit sad, she still pondered for a bit before answering. October 2008, outside Purgatory Island, along the path of the Assassin League's Nissa El Ghul's trial. Rip nodded slightly and patted his capable comrade's shoulder. "Gideon, go to October 2008. Everyone sit down and prepare to depart." The last sentence was for the remaining crew members. But when they all sat down like elementary school students and waited for 5 minutes, nothing happened. They all looked at Rip in confusion, meaning, "What's wrong with your ship again?" As the ship's repairman, the black man was already preparing to repair it. "Captain, it's..." Before the blue electronic voice could finish, it was interrupted by a clear voice. "Ahaha, it's me, sorry to disturb." The only one who didn't treat herself as an outsider was young Mistress Thea. Thea separated from them, but after running for a short distance, she remembered that she had damaged the skateboard for no reason. No matter what, she had to ask them for compensation. There were so many pieces of futuristic technology on the ship, she couldn't just let it go, so she circled around and came back. Her hinting was ineffective against hostile targets, but fortunately, apart from Captain Frigid and Heatwave, everyone else on the ship was on the side of justice, so they didn't have any ill intentions towards her. Plus, with her professional stealth skills, she constantly used the shadows to hide from the two hostile eyes. Thea also followed them onto the ship. Just as she was wondering how she should start, she didn't expect these people to be so impatient, wanting to take off without saying anything. The young mistress was naturally discovered by the omnipresent AI, so to avoid awkwardness, she had no choice but to stand up. "Why is it you again?" Heatwave, who thought with his fists more than his brain, was furious just looking at her. He'd worn that fireproof suit for so many years that he'd grown attached to it, and it was all because of this person that he burned it in anger, so she had to pay for it. He wanted to rush up and fight, but the gloomy Captain Frigid held him back, coldly watching the situation unfold. "Miss Quinn, what business do you have here?" As the captain, Rip was the first to ask. "If not, I wouldn't have come." Thea crossed her arms. "That woman in black was here to cause trouble, wasn't she?" There was nothing that couldn't be said, it was the truth. Rip nodded. "You're talking about the Time Wanderer, right?" "That's right." Thea raised her skateboard and pointed at the large hole in it. "She destroyed my equipment. Without it, I can't leave the island. My mother is home alone. If I can't go back, it'll be so pitiful. You'll have to fix it, right?" Actually, she could have flown the helicopter back, But Rip and the others didn't know. So Thea described her situation as terrible. Chapter 153. Seeing Thea acting cute and pitiful without the demeanor of an expert. They all had complicated feelings, especially Rip Hunt. Was the Time Wanderer, an assassin whose name had shaken the multiverse, really killed by this guy? Fortunately, she wasn't here to blackmail them, and her request was reasonable. He had an AI on his spaceship and 2 professors who could sell their theses by the pound. It was just repairing some technological equipment, and he could even fix a spaceship for her. Just as he was about to ask them to help him get rid of her and get it over with. Captain, let me remind you, we've stayed at this point for too long, and we've attracted the attention of the Board of Governors at this point in time. The search team is expected to appear in 3 minutes and 12 seconds. The artificial intelligence Gideon reported unhurriedly. Oh God, Rip Hunter slapped his forehead and quickly walked to Thea's side. Miss Quinn, you heard it, we're about to depart, don't you think you should? Does that mean you should run away? Thea wasn't so easily fooled. The skateboard wasn't badly damaged, and back in Star City, the tools were ready-made and could be repaired in half a day. She was just using this as an excuse to get on the spaceship. There were so many high-tech crystals on the spaceship, as well as the Atom Man's suit energy source and shrinking technology, all of which made her jealous. Now you want to drive me away? Dream on. She shook her head fiercely. Even if you let me get off the spaceship now, I can't go home, so I'll just stay here. Miss Quinn, I'm doing this for your own good. If you insist on traveling with us, of course I'll welcome you. But your own history will be forcibly erased. You're different from us, you're an important person in the timeline, so you can't just leave. Rip Hunter's words were sincere. The team members he chose were all people who had no influence on the original timeline. Hearing this, Thea was shocked. So not everyone could get on the spaceship. He didn't look like he was lying. I'd better hurry up and leave. What a waste of so many good things. In that case, I'll take my leave first. Thea said and ran out. Miss Quinn, you can actually time travel. AI Gideon said to everyone's surprise. Thea also stopped, waiting to hear what it had to say. Gideon, are you mistaken? As the captain of the ship, Rip understood the rules very well. Anyone who could cause more than a 1% change in the timeline was strictly forbidden from using time travel, because the slightest mistake could cause a huge disturbance. Captain, I'm not mistaken. Miss Quinn's body somehow absorbed part of the Time Walker's characteristics, but she doesn't have an official appointment from the Time Council. She is fully qualified for time travel according to the provisions of Rule 112, Paragraph 18 of the Council. Do you mean that she has the right to travel through time? She won't cause chaos in the timeline and can maintain the original historical trajectory? Rip Hunt was also a little confused. This was the first time he had heard of such a situation. After asking Gideon a few more questions, he hurriedly explained to Thea, giving her the general idea. He wanted to go into detail, but there was no time. Although she didn't understand some of the words, Thea still understood some of the inside story. In layman's terms, when the black-clothed woman self-destructed, her work permit was left with Thea. Rip Hunt was only a former employee of the Time Masters Council, while the rest of the people on this ship were all privately recruited by him, each of them temporary workers. Thinking of this, Thea suddenly felt a lot taller. Although she wasn't officially employed, she was still an official worker. Now that she got it, Thea hurriedly found a seat and sat down. If they didn't leave now, they would be discovered. The time travel process was nothing special. It was almost over in the blink of an eye. There was no scenery along the way. This short trip made Thea feel very uncomfortable, as if something was coming out of her body. According to the few people, there would be some symptoms during time travel. Some would lose their speech, some would lose their sight, but they would recover after a while. Thea was also relieved. The ship docked on land. After learning that they were going to put Sarah in 2008 back to the original historical trajectory, which was the time when Thea left, Thea didn't get off the ship. She always felt that it was like releasing animals in the wild. It was really boring, so she just looked around on the ship. Are you Miss Kendra? Thea stopped an African woman and took the initiative to greet her. This woman was Hawk Girl. In her previous life, or rather in her first life, she was the High Priestess of Egypt. She just happened to have the Ball of Horus translate it. The very shy Hawk Girl smiled. Thea, actually I know you. It was you and Oliver who helped us. Damn it. This feeling is terrible. I know her and she knows me, but I still have to pretend that I don't know her. She still has to explain why I don't know her. Time travel was really the easiest place to pull the wool over one's eyes. Thea was too lazy to talk nonsense with her. After a short conversation with a few people on the ship, she had already figured out that her husband, Hawkman, had been dead for a long time. To be honest, she despised this couple. From ancient Egypt to today, they had been reincarnated 206 times. What was the result of wasting so many reincarnation opportunities? Every time they were hunted down by their old enemy, Vandal Savage, and the old man didn't bother to kill them 206 times. What a waste! Normally, they would awaken their memories when they reached adulthood. Knowing that their old enemy would come, they should have made some preparations. What did these two do? And that was to run away as fast as he could. The two were chased like sheep. They ran from Siberia to Canberra, from Yokohama to the Congo. The two climbed snow mountains, crossed grasslands, and walked through deserts. Other than measuring the size of the world with their feet, they didn't contribute anything to the development of human society. To be able to chase them to the ends of the earth, one had to think that this Vandal Savage was especially powerful. With the word "duh" in his name, was he Darkseid's cousin? The kind that could kill Superman with one punch and kill Batman with a backhand? Actually, that was not the case at all. Apart from having a ferocious beard, Vandal Savage's only commendable trait was that he could throw 2 flying daggers. Most likely, he was bored during the 4,000 years of chasing, so he took a year and a half to practice this unique skill. Other than that, he didn't have any other special skills. However, Big Beard's ambition wasn't small. He wanted to rule the world. For this goal, he planned for another 4,000 years, relying on his immortality. Finally, in 2166, he used tortoise tactics to kill all the heroes who could fight. Finally, he could stand on the rooftop and shout that he was the king of the world. Rip Hunter was deeply dissatisfied with the old man. He couldn't bear to see him doing well, so he resigned in anger. In 2016, he gathered a boat of friends to interrupt his dream. This was the general plot of the story that Thea knew. It was a big adventure filled with revolutionary optimism. Chapter 154. Kendra did not know that Thea was criticizing her in her mind. She asked kindly, "You didn't get off the spaceship. Why are you looking for me?" Of course, Thea wanted to talk to her about something. The orb of Horus she found on Purgatory Island was filled with words that gave her a headache. After studying and comparing the words, she was dismayed to find that most of the words had been lost. Fortunately, there were 3 people who had survived from that era. They were the ancient Egyptian high priest Vandal Savage, the priestess Chayara, the current Hawkgirl Kendra, and the current Hawkman Prince Khufu. Vandal would definitely ignore Sia, and Eagle Man had also died. Even if he didn't die, Sia wouldn't have any feelings for him. After all, this guy was Khufu in his first life, the guy who was famous for building the largest pyramid. According to history, he was a man who loved grandiose achievements but was unlearned. The so-called man who was full of nonsense was him. Thea looked at the friendly Hawkman with anticipation. She took out the orb from her backpack. "Do you have any impression of this?" Kendra took the orb. Its handle was 30 centimeters long, and it was golden in color. There was a red gemstone at the top. She played with it and asked uncertainly, "Is this a hammer?" Pfft. Thea almost vomited blood. "Hammer my ass." Perhaps her expression was a little scary, but Kendra knew that she had misunderstood. She said embarrassedly, "You might not know this, but I was just a waitress in a cafe half a year ago. I don't know much about fighting." She was right. She did not know much about fighting. Her husband, who had accompanied her through 206th life, had taught her how to fight. She would spread her wings and fly over with the hammer. She would smash the enemy's head with a single blow. If the enemy fell, she would be done with it. If not, she would fly further away and do it again. What kind of F***king strategy was that? She had unparalleled speed. How much damage could she cause to the enemy with a sharp weapon? She could fly at the speed of sound with a 3-meter-long spear. Even Darkseid would lose a few drops of HP from the impact. Even if she could not defeat the enemy, it would look tragic, right? They had given up on this strategy and chose to use the hammer instead. Use a hammer. Use a hammer. Important things had to be said thrice. Flying in front of the enemy, swinging his arm and hammering him. Even if they wanted to use a hammer, They could have used a large hammer instead. However, the two of them chose to use small one-handed hammers. Their destructive power might not even be as great as Thea's rock. Thea also knew that she couldn't expect too much from this pair of weaklings, but the bloody reality still made her sad. Did she really have to ask Vandal? Miss Thea, I can translate these words. The omnipresent artificial intelligence, Gideon, interrupted her thoughts in a timely manner. To be honest, Thea was a little afraid of the artificial intelligence on this spaceship. She coveted the technological achievements, but she did not dare to lay her hands on the artificial intelligence. Others might not know, but she knew very well that Gideon had developed a bit of admiration for Rip Hunter, the captain. What did that mean? It meant that this artificial intelligence had feelings. It had reached the peak of artificial intelligence, and was at the same level as Marvel's Ultron Ada. It was a bit weaker than Brainiac, but not by much. If it wasn't for its feelings for Rip Hunter, Gideon would have been able to access the real world's network in a matter of minutes. Thea had always kept a respectful distance from this kind of boss-level passerby character. Although she thought about artificial intelligence day and night, she had never thought about Gideon. Now that it had taken the initiative to talk to her, she could not refuse and could only express her gratitude very politely. As the crystallization of human wisdom that traversed the river of time and knew all the knowledge of both ancient and modern times, Gideon's ability was not to be underestimated. In less than 3 minutes, it had completely deciphered the words on the sphere of Horus and even thoughtfully made it into an annotated version. This guy is amazing, Thea thought to herself as she held the annotated version. It was actually able to estimate Thea's knowledge structure and level of understanding through various calculations. Its annotated version was very accurate and was tailor-made for Thea. Although she did not like the feeling of being seen through, she had to admit that Gideon's translation was very accurate. But when she looked at the translation carefully, she could not help but frown. Horus was the guardian of the pharaohs in ancient Egypt and the symbol of royalty. Horus usually accepted priests in the form of an eagle head and a human body. There were a total of 3 artifacts that were passed down in the world: the Eye of Horus, the Scepter of Horus, and the Sphere of Horus. The Eye of Horus was said to have been offered to Hades, the Sphere of Horus was in Thea's hands, and the scepter was specially marked by Gideon as being in the hands of Vandal Savage. Thea narrowed her eyes. This artificial intelligence was quite sneaky, leaving a bait for Thea to bite. You want the scepter? Well, go and fight with Vandal. He happens to be the enemy of the legendary team. What a coincidence, it's fate. No one would feel comfortable being used as a tool. Thea lowered her head and pondered. In her memory, Vandal's Scepter of Horus was destroyed by the combined efforts of the Green Arrow and the Flash. It was hard to say if he still had it in his hands in this timeline. Thea sighed. She still could not resist the temptation. Should she help? Depressing. Her experience with Gotham made Thea a little resistant to helping. Although these people were stronger than the Bat family, there was a limit to their strength. She would not become the main force again if she helped, right? In the timeline of Hawkgirl and the others, the scepter had been destroyed, but to Thea it had not happened yet. This created a paradox. Did it happen or not? If it was still there, she could easily take it. It was a set. If it was already destroyed, it would be useless even if she chopped Vandal up and fed him to the dogs. Thea shook her head. She bid farewell to the artificial intelligence and the confused Hawkgirl Kendra. She was going to ask the old driver, no, the old Captain Rip Hunter. Before she could find the old captain, Thea was stopped by Atom Man Palmer. The Atom Man was all smiles as he helped to repair her skateboard. He dragged her to see the latest results. Thea could only follow. Since he was so eager to help, she had to take the initiative. Miss Thea, was your skateboard software written by Felicity? Atom Man Palmer said with a confident expression. Damn, was it really that good? Thea had just been seen through by Gideon, and now he had exposed the source of the technology. She could not accept it. It was not surprising that the artificial intelligence could see through countless calculations per second, but how did you find out? Professor Palmer, how did you find out? Are the traces that obvious? Ray Palmer laughed proudly at first, then his expression turned serious. Actually, the software part of my battlesuit was written by her too. Haha. Chapter 155. Sia looked at him speechlessly. Speaking of which, this Joker's personality was really good. Plus, he was tall and handsome, and he was humorous and witty. He would definitely be the best mentor and helpful friend if he were to be her boyfriend. It was the biggest tragedy for him to be her boyfriend. There was no room for negotiation. This person was too unreliable. The two came to the maintenance room of the Wave Rider. The Firestorm duo was also there. The black guy was the ship's repairman. The fat old man looked serious, but he was actually a talker. When Thea entered the room, he was still talking to the black guy. "Let me introduce you. This is Professor Martin Stein. He is the current authority in the field of nuclear physics. This is his partner Jackson. He is our ship's repairman. He is very skilled." Ray Palmer introduced the two of them to each other. Sia saw that they were repairing her skateboard, so she praised the two of them very respectfully. She said that they were the leading figures in the field of physics, the saviors of Central City, and the defenders of human justice. The good thing about being a hero of justice was that they were thin-skinned. The fat old man had won countless Nobel Prizes and was often praised, so he had a strong immunity. The black guy who was working as a repairman was completely embarrassed. He showed his big white teeth and smiled brightly. Thea praised him for being free while looking at his handiwork. After all, this guy had been a car mechanic half a year ago, and had been forcefully recruited by the careless Rip Hunter to repair a spaceship. Sia had always been suspicious of his skills. But after looking at the scene, the black guy's repair skills were indeed quite good. Although he was not as good as the omnipotent Batman, he was still very talented. "Your skateboard was originally driven by magnetic power, right? We don't have a dynamic drive part. We just added a few speed gears. You can adjust it to high speed when you're on the road and freely control it during combat. This will increase your unit synchronization rate with the skateboard." Atom Man pointed to a device at the bottom of the skateboard and introduced. "At the same time, I upgraded your software. Or rather, I used the program Felicity wrote in 2016 to overwrite the program she wrote in 2007. After all, she wrote the driver software for my suit." Then he introduced a few more major changes. This guy was indeed a weakened version of Iron Man. In just half a day without major changes, the overall performance of the skateboard had been improved by 30%. If the original version was only 0.7, then the current skateboard could be considered the official version. Both the braking and synchronization rate had been greatly enhanced. Thea operated the skateboard indoors for a while, and her flexibility had increased by a lot. It was not an exaggeration to say that she could move the skateboard like an extension of her arm. Although he was grateful, Thea, who was eyeing the technological achievements of this ship covetously, had to be squeezed out of a stone to get something out of it. Gideon was too smart and scary to make a mistake, but the three guys in front of him seemed to be able to make use of them. "Thank you, Dr. Palmer, Professor Stein, and Mr. Jackson. If it weren't for your help, I wouldn't have been able to go home." Thea could not directly tell them what good things they had. She needed them to contribute voluntarily. Thea began her old path of acting cute and pitiful. Some time ago, Tian watched Moira on the stage, shouting herself hoarse to call for the protection of women and children, and the elimination of racial discrimination. Unknowingly, Sia's acting skills had also improved greatly. Now she dared not say that her acting skills were perfect, but it was more than enough to deal with these heroes. In the blink of an eye, she had charmed the three of them. The first to give in was the black guy who was single. There were more men than women on this ship, and there were only two of them. There were some sparks between Sarah and Captain Lung. Both of them were ruthless people, so the black guy did not dare to tease Sarah. As for the silly and sweet Kendra, she had a husband who lived with her in 206. After her husband died, he was immediately replaced by the handsome Atom Man. Could be said that he had no chance. Now, facing Thea's pretentious act, although he knew that it was impossible between the two of them, the natural instinct of a male creature to show off still prevailed. "I'll install a deep-level connection network for you. In the future, you can remotely control the skateboard from 5 miles away. How about that? Awesome, right?" The black guy's eyes were not his eyes and his mouth was not his mouth. "Mr. Jackson, I have to remind you that the deep-level connection network is a technology 35 years in the future. According to the Time Council's Article 19-112, it is not to be disclosed." Gideon's emotionless voice came out. The black guy acted as if he did not hear anything. He deftly added a device to the side of the skateboard and made an okay gesture. Thea had a hard time holding it in. It was not a waste of her effort to act pitiful here. This technology was already very awesome. The technology of the Iron Man's remote control suit was similar to this. She had made a fortune. When the value of the young guy was almost squeezed out, she looked at the two high-level intellectuals with bright eyes. The fat old man was old enough to be her grandfather. Naturally, he was not lustful. He was just influenced by her acting skills and felt that she was a little pitiful. After thinking about it, the fat old man took out two things that looked like number 5 batteries. He handed them to the black guy and motioned for him to install them. He also explained to Thea that this was not future technology, but a nuclear battery that he had researched. So, little girl, you can use it without worry. In the future, if the magnetic force suddenly disappeared, you can use it as an emergency. Thea was speechless. If the magnetic force disappeared, how many people on Earth could survive? However, the principle of this thing could be modified into a super bomb. No matter what, the fat old man had given out such a good item without any qualms. He was truly worthy of being called a master of the Mount Tai and the North Star. Comparatively speaking, the handsome atomic man was much more resistant to beauty than Thea. When the three of them looked at him, he thought about it and then awkwardly said that he would be able to complete the atomization in a day if he gave the skateboard to him. This was a pleasant surprise. Thea had no objection to him taking it back for modification. This was his exclusive technology, so he would definitely not modify it in front of them. After thanking them for their generosity, Thea was not in a hurry to find Rip Hunter. She went back to rest happily. The next day, Thea received the brand new version 1 of the skateboard. Usually it was only the size of a cigarette box. She could just put it anywhere. It was much lighter than before when she had to carry a big bag everywhere. Unfortunately, this technology was not easy to crack. Miss Thea, has your skateboard been fixed? Rip Hunter had already put Sarah back in 2008 in her original timeline. He was now looking at her with a smile. The hidden message was, "You don't have an excuse this time, right? Hurry up and go back to your own timeline." Thea also felt that she had gotten all the benefits on this ship. What was she waiting for? Just as he was about to agree, Gideon suddenly interjected. "Let's stop while we're ahead. Captain, Miss Thea is going to fight Vandal Savage with us." Chapter 156. They all let out an unintelligible exclamation. Is that what happened? This little girl is really warm-hearted and courageous? The technical trio who had suffered a huge loss yesterday all looked relieved. The big joker, no, the handsome atomic man who was originally reluctant, turned from cloudy to sunny. He shook Thea's hand and said, "A friend in need is a friend indeed. It seems that I misunderstood you." The black guy and the fat old man also ran over to express their gratitude. The black guy was a little embarrassed, but the fat old man didn't care. He was old enough to be Thea's grandfather, so he gave her a brotherly hug. F***ck. Thea wanted to cry but had no tears. She had been tricked by this cunning artificial intelligence. If she rejected it now, the three of them would immediately turn hostile. She was not afraid of them turning hostile, but if they said that they wanted to take back those technological devices, how could she reject them? She couldn't just kill them. She couldn't do such a tasteless thing. This damn Gideon. Thea hated him to death, but she still had to put on a righteous front. What did he mean by "I'm a hero"? What did he mean by "I won't return Lulan till the end"? Vandal Savage must die. Although he felt that her acting was a little exaggerated, Rip Hunt still thought it was a good thing. After all, Thea could fight 7 of them alone and retreat. That was strength. As the captain, he didn't have any objections to her bringing her own food to help. Come on, come on. Isn't it just providing a place to stay? We have a lot of empty rooms on board. You can stay wherever you want. Just as he was about to give a welcoming speech, Captain Lung said sarcastically, "What does she have? With those few arrows? We didn't use any weapons that day." He was annoyed at the mention of this. In the future, he was someone who wasn't even afraid of the Flash. Now, he was beaten up by an ordinary person and he was one of the 7. Just thinking about it made him angry. Damn it, if I used a freeze gun I would never lose. He was annoyed and Heatwave was even more annoyed. Captain Lung went up and tried a few times, but whether it worked or not was another matter. He didn't see what was going on before he was caught in the net. After that, he was rescued like a dead pig. Thea kept her head down and ignored their hostility. I'm not going to explain it to you. If you want to fight, I'll just get off the ship. No one can say anything. But her thoughts did not escape Gideon, who was calculating billions of teraflops per second. This annoying artificial intelligence spoke again. According to Article 2, Article 55 of the Time Council Act of Principle, the members of the Wave Rider can check the history of special personnel, but at least 3 people have to agree. Check. I agree. Me too. Captain Lung and Heatwave expressed their opinions as soon as it finished speaking. The scene was quiet for a moment as everyone was trying to figure out who would be the third one to jump out. Actually, I'm quite curious too. Commander Billy Palmer nodded when he saw that no one spoke. I agree too. He even gave Thea an apologetic smile. Humph. Thea glanced at him. He was a billionaire after all. His sunshine and cheerfulness were real, but it didn't mean that he was stupid. If he was stupid, would his billions fall from the sky? Thea, who was also a rich person, knew this style of doing things too well. He took advantage of others without offending anyone. Because she was also this kind of person, after Gideon got the authorization, he showed a smile that was calm in the eyes of others, but proud in Thea's eyes. Checking. Thea Quinn, the last archmage in recorded human history. Her last public appearance was in 2071 at the funeral of her brother Oliver Quinn, who was 86 years old. At that time she still retained her youthful appearance. After that, she disappeared into the long river of history. Everyone was stunned by his words. Even the person involved, Thea, was a little stunned. She didn't know that her sister would be so powerful in the future. Listen, the last great mage. So cool. As a member of the Green Arrow Party for a few days, Sarah Lance, who knew about Thea's past, was a little dazed. This is different from what I remember, right? Or do I know a fake Thea? Mage. Captain Lung was not satisfied with this conclusion. What are her outstanding achievements? Sorry, this involves important historical events. I can't reveal it. Gideon rejected Captain Lung's request under Thea's confused gaze. Can't reveal it? Seems like she's an important person. Captain Lung speculated while rubbing his chin. Then how did she enter the public eye? Can you tell us? Gideon's voice was still calm. It requires the person involved to agree. Everyone's eyes unconsciously turned to Thea again. They were curious, surprised, and gossipy. In fact, they were curious. Thea was also a little curious because she thought she hid it well. How did she give herself away? Cal agree. Although he agreed, he hated this evil AI to the core. Can't you tell me in private? They waited with rapt attention, but after 2 minutes, Gideon still did not show any sign of interest. Just when Rip Hunter thought it had crashed, it finally spoke. I also need the consent of another person involved. Their heads were full of question marks. What did this mean? Did this matter involve them as well? They looked at each other as if they were about to expose a traitor. Was it you? It must be you, right? Gideon, whose consent do you need? As the captain, Rip Hunter was too lazy to guess. It was better to just ask directly. Mr. Snart. Gideon gave an answer that made everyone's jaws drop. Captain Lung's mouth opened a little wider than usual. He put away his usual pretentiousness. I didn't know her in the past. I definitely didn't have any contact with her. Can't be the future. Didn't you say that when we enter time travel, our original tracks will be erased? In other words, it's impossible for me to meet her in the future. His analysis was spot on. A few members who thought that their IQ was passable were thinking about it. Sia was also wondering how she could have come into contact with him. He was in Central City and she was in Star City. Normally, they wouldn't have come into contact with each other. Mr. Snart, you robbed the Central City History Museum in 2010. Miss Thea, who was in charge of the meeting, had no choice but to stop you. That's what history says. Captain Lung stood up angrily. Nonsense, I've never met her. I didn't rob any museum in 2010 either. No, you've met her. History can't be wrong. Seeing how firm it was, Captain Lung was a little uncertain. He asked his good partner Heatwave. Mick, do you remember? Getting an uncertain answer, he was a little confused. It didn't make sense. His memory was clear. He definitely didn't know Thea. Chapter 157. Mr. Snart, Gideon continued to explain in an infuriating tone. Miss Thea has most of the Time Walker's authority. Her energy level is higher than yours. If she's in the same timeline as you, she'll automatically overwrite part of your past. At this time, Captain Han finally realized what it meant to be thunderstruck. Vaguely, some of his memories were indeed loosened. What the F***ck? You didn't say anything when she boarded the ship. You set me up. What's the point of telling me now? If Thea knew what he was thinking, she would definitely run over and shake his hand. You finally understand me, right? This guy is too evil. He'll set me up without paying for it. Sarah Lance, who had been silent all this while, pointed at Thea and said, She's probably the one who interacted with me the most. Is my future still there? Gideon calculated for a while. If Miss Thea still maintains her original trajectory and shoots you to death in 2015, your history won't change much. Well, I still have to beg her to shoot me when the time comes? Why am I such a bitch? Sarah's expression was either ugly or speechless. She silently looked at Thea without saying a word. At this time, Thea finally remembered that she did shoot Sarah Lance to death in the 3rd year of the storyline. However, at that time, Old Horse was the scapegoat. Oliver, who was obsessed with his sister, pretended that it never happened. Now, however, Old Horse was ordered by her to search for his ancestors. Who should she find to be the scapegoat? Besides, she probably didn't know about it. After all, it hadn't happened on her side yet. Thea immediately used her increasingly skilled acting skills and made a confused expression. To be honest, this expression was a test of her acting skills. She didn't have enough time to figure it out. Thea could only use all her skills to play the role of an ignorant girl. She was afraid that she would be seen through if her expression was not on point, so she even added a hint spell on herself. Fortunately, the people on this ship were all good at fighting and killing. They didn't have a teacher who was both virtuous and skilled. Although Gideon was as cunning as a ghost, he was still not a human. It was impossible for him to completely simulate human emotions. With several factors, her performance was successful. The legendary squad only knew that Sarah Lance had been killed once and then resurrected. However, he had never known who the murderer was. Today, he finally knew. There was only one truth, and it turned out that she was the murderer. But seeing that Sarah didn't seem to mind, they could guess that there was another story behind this. Naturally, they wouldn't poke their noses into other people's business. They could only sigh at how small the world was. Don't ask anymore. Let's get ready to set off. Since Miss Thea is going with us, let me introduce our mission objective to you. Rip Hunt hurriedly cut off their questions. After all, the timeline was extremely fragile, and Thea still needed to return to the original timeline. If she knew too much, she could easily do something that could cause half of the Legends party to disappear. So he hurriedly stopped the others who wanted to continue gossiping. In fact, his so-called introduction of the objective was very simple, and the specific battle plan was so mysterious that it made people's hair stand on end. Using the spaceship's shuttling function, a group of transmigrators would drive to Vandal Savage's backyard, and then quickly take him down and bring him back. There would be no cover, no support, no plan 1, no plan 2. It would be a one-wave attack. Everyone would rush up and use their ultimate skills, regardless of whether they were dead or alive, to drag him back. This plan was simply brainless to the extreme. Sia was only left with disdain for these people's battle tactics. One had to know that they were outside the timeline and they knew everything. Using such a huge cheat to fight an old native who didn't know the future for 16 episodes, they really embarrassed the transmigrators. But at least they were on the same ship. This place was different from Gotham. She didn't have overwhelming strength, so she wanted to keep a low profile. Thinking back, it seemed that Vandal was also brainlessly captured. Since they could win whether she participated or not, why should she be the bad guy? Sit tight, Gideon. Set the coordinates, London 2166. Rip Hunter didn't wait for them to object, and arbitrarily skipped the discussion process. The original proposal became the final plan. Thea was speechless. How many people on this ship didn't object? She pouted. A bunch of unorganized, undisciplined, and thoughtless people. They didn't have any strategy or cooperation. She would just be a bystander. Once she got the whereabouts of the scepter of Horus, she would retreat. Whenever she thought of the scepter, she felt depressed. This cunning artificial intelligence had stopped talking about this matter. The meaning was very clear. She had to follow the main group and kill a few people to prove her loyalty. Sia let out a long sigh and sat on the chair, ready to wait for the spaceship to pass through the time tunnel. Everyone sit tight. Let's go. Rip said in an imposing manner, but no one paid him any attention. They all sat down with their eyes closed, competing with each other. It seems that they weren't used to this kind of traveling either. Thea glanced at them from the corner of her eyes. None of them were optimistic about this so-called time travel. The oldest among them, the chubby old man, was already sweating profusely. She didn't know if this time travel was a test of mental power or endurance, but Thea believed that she didn't lack either. She was only looking at them with the attitude of watching a joke. Who asked you to gossip about me earlier? I'll just watch now, I won't say anything. But as the spaceship entered the depths of time, Thea didn't have the mood to watch a joke. This feeling was indescribable. She felt like every single cell in her body was rapidly expanding. What's going on? Thea tried her best to endure the pain and turned to look at the people around her. Although their expressions weren't good, they weren't as bad as she was. Take the chubby old man for example. His expression was that of a cut on his hand, but why does it feel like I've been cut by a knife? This isn't right. She endured it bitterly. Every second felt extremely long. Even though her body was in extreme pain, her powerful mental power was still stubbornly supporting her, preventing her from fainting. You? When the fat old man beside her saw her strange behavior, his glasses almost fell off. He pointed at her with a trembling finger and stuttered, unable to speak. Thea was about to ask him what was wrong with her when she noticed that the spaceship had entered a thin wall, instantly increasing the burden on her body to its maximum. She could faintly hear Rip Hunt's low voice saying, "We've arrived at the year 2166. This is the final battle, oh my God." Before he could finish, Thea felt an immense amount of energy surging out from the depths of her soul. Countless blinding lights filled her body. Whether it was her blood vessels, bones, lymph, or cells, everything was bathed in a blinding white light. The incalculable amount of energy instantly crushed the last bit of consciousness she had left to resist, causing her to fall unconscious. Chapter 158. Time seemed to be eternally unchanging. After an unknown period of time, she heard someone calling her in her dazed consciousness. The voice was gentle and beautiful, but the tone was not so kind. "Wake up, pighead. You big idiot, you're going to die if you don't wake up." Who dares to call me that? Do you want to die? Thea opened her eyes in a daze. Her gaze was unfocused, and it took her a while to see the person who was hitting her. Who is this? She had a white face and wore a somewhat retro robe. She was tall with a pair of long legs, light-colored eyebrows, and silver hair. Silver hair? Are there still people who dye their hair white these days? She glanced at the person's chest. There were two small buns. They were not big, but the shape was not bad. Thea moved her lips. Fortunately, her speech was not affected. "Big sister, who are you?" The silver-haired woman had an awkward expression on her face. She angrily grabbed Thea's collar and shook it. "Big sister? Don't you recognize me?" "It's me." Thea was confused. Is she really someone I know? She looked carefully, tried to recall, and repeatedly confirmed. "Who are you? And where is this?" "You're so stupid. This is the space of consciousness. I'm Arthas. Do you remember now?" The silver-haired woman covered her head with one hand and said embarrassedly, "Arthas?" Thea's first reaction was, "Did I transmigrate to World of Warcraft again? No way." Just as she was wondering if her sorcerer system was compatible with Dalaran's, she suddenly realized that the woman had mentioned the word, space of consciousness. Since it was the space of consciousness, she must have not transmigrated. The identity of the silver-haired woman was obvious. "Arthas. That dumb and adorable guy?" Sia said as she gestured with her right hand to show that she was on all fours. Arthas's face darkened. "That's a turtle, right? I can see part of your thoughts. Don't think I don't know what you're thinking. Tui 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 tui." Huh. Thea recognized this iconic action. As expected of my cute pet. But she was so cute when she was young. Why is she not likable when she grows up? By the way, how did you grow up? Isn't it going to be exposed to the sun for a long time? Thea felt a little wronged. No one would associate this silver-haired beauty with the little unicorn that had just been weaned. There was a limit to one's imagination. You're the one who's exposed to the sun, not a dead pig. When Earthies heard the word exposure, half of her face turned black, and the veins on her forehead began to throb. Her eyelids drooped as she said in a low voice, "As for how I grew up, I don't know." Thea looked around. Was this really the space of consciousness? It was a vast expanse of whiteness. It was similar to what he had imagined. But what was he doing here? How did I get in here? The silver-haired Arthas asked. You didn't summon me, how would I know? Earthies, who had turned into a beautiful unicorn for some unknown reason, said angrily. Thea stared at her for a long time. The way her eyes were shining was indeed very similar to when she was young. However, at that time Thea would always throw some food to her. Now she didn't have any. Could it be that she could conjure food out of her imagination? For some reason Thea felt very hungry. Very hungry. However, no matter how much she tried, there was no food in front of her. Could it be that my space of consciousness is fake? What are you thinking about? This isn't a dream. You're so stupid. A clear voice rang out behind them. The pure white space seemed to be dyed with a layer of black ink. After continuous converging, a tall woman wearing a black veil slowly walked out of it. Thea frowned as she looked at the woman. She knew this woman because other than her black hair and eyes, she looked exactly the same as her. Even though she had some guesses, she still asked carefully, "Who are you?" The woman in the black veil blushed and the corner of her lips twitched. "You've done so many things with me, and you're asking me who I am." Thea hurriedly shook her head. Wasn't it to test your limit? She thought for a long time but still couldn't figure out what your was, so she could only vaguely say it. Looking at the unicorn beauty and the woman in the black veil standing on opposite sides, it was clear that they didn't like each other. The unicorn was a silly girl. This was the space of the bloodline mark, not Thea's space of consciousness. In theory, she was the guest and these two were the hosts. She knew Arthas, but the newcomer in the black veil should at least have a name. Using hey or hey to address her obviously wouldn't work. Moreover, seeing someone who looked exactly like her in an unfamiliar environment, she couldn't help but feel a little scared. How should I address you? The woman in the black veil was secretly relieved that she changed the topic. She recovered some of her spirit and said with a sweet smile, "You can call me Thea." She paused and saw the surprise in her eyes. She was very proud. "Thea Merlin. You? Did you just make up a name?" Thea was furious. "How dare you steal my name? Do you still want to live?" "I was called this name when I had self-awareness, so I knew it automatically." The woman in the black veil named Thea Merlin answered indifferently. She even pointed her middle finger at the unicorn standing opposite her. Earthies, on the other hand, did not show any signs of weakness as she flashed her mouth full of white teeth. She even made a strangling gesture with her hands. Thea scratched her head. Their relationship was really harmonious. If she wasn't here, the two of them might have already started fighting. Her bloodline talent was very strange. Light and darkness, a sunny unicorn and a dark shadow. The unicorn could be seen as the good side of the Quinn family, and the shadow represented the evil side of Malcolm. Or it could be said that the unicorn represented the original Thea Quinn warrior's personality, and the shadow represented the path of a mage that was accidentally fused with the transmigrator. The same starting point, different choices, different results. This matter couldn't be considered carefully. There were more and more things that could be interpreted. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was extremely frightening. Fortunately, the two powers were now her own. There was no such thing as either one or the other. She interrupted the two people, beasts, who were about to fight loudly. "Stop fooling around. Can someone explain to me why you suddenly grew up? And how am I going to get out of here?" Arthas, who was strangling Thea Merlin, said energetically, "I'll tell you later. I'm telling you, I know a lot." Thea, who was in a disadvantageous position, didn't show any weakness. She used her knee to hit Arthas's small bean bun, and her other two hands scratched and scratched. She didn't stop talking. "I'm a great mage. I know the situation here. I'll tell you after I get rid of her." Chapter 159. Thea was speechless as she looked at the two buffoons. Was she thinking too much before? There might not be any secrets in this. These two are purely here to harm me. I don't even know what's going on outside, but these two are already playing with each other. Yes, Thea thought that they were just playing. In this space, no supernatural power can be used. The two of them were like shrews fighting, kicking and slapping each other. Seeing that the black-clothed Thea's face was swollen by Earthy's slap, a black light flashed in the space, and the injury was instantly healed. In such a place where you can revive with full health, what is this if it's not playing? Seeing that they were not going to stop, Thea hurriedly went up and pulled them away. Because in such a short time, she felt that she was getting hungrier and hungrier. Could it be that their injuries are consuming my physical strength? Thea, who had read a lot of books, automatically came to this conclusion. If I let them fight for a while, I won't die, right? Stop, stop. Thea had just pulled the two of them away, when Earthy's took advantage of the fact that Thea's back was facing her. She kicked the black-clothed Thea again, and then proudly ran away alone. You bastard! You actually helped her hit me. The black-clothed Thea bypassed her and continued to chase after Earthy's. Oh my God! Save me, old man! Thea looked up to the sky and roared. How much sin did I commit in my previous life to meet these two? Then the three of them entered the stage of a chase. At first, Earthy's was leading, the black-clothed Thea was chasing, and Thea was persuading at the end. At other times, the black-clothed Thea was taking advantage of the situation and running in front. Earthy's was chasing after her while spitting saliva, and Thea continued to persuade her from behind. Thea spent a lot of effort to appease these two immortals. In the process, they signed a lot of unequal treaties, such as promising to buy delicious food for Earthy's in the future, and not continuing to ask the black-clothed Thea to do those indescribable games. Alright, stop messing around. Thea felt like she was an auntie in a kindergarten, taking care of two seemingly mature, but actually very young naughty children. She coaxed them and finally stabilized the situation. Damn it, after running for such a long time, the feeling of hunger was getting stronger and stronger. He had to get out quickly. I hesitated for a moment. Arthas doesn't seem reliable. I should ask Black Thea. After all, she has the surname of an archmage, so she should know more. Tell me what happened. He pointed at Black Thea and asked. His words sounded very impressive. If he were to wear a police uniform and write these words on the wall, it would be even more impressive. Black Thea rolled her eyes at her. Our minds are connected. I know what you're thinking. Your imagination is really wild. Under Thea's awkward expression, she continued. If I'm not wrong, it should be because you passed through the time vortex that caused the current situation. Our strengthening condition is light. Broadly speaking, time is also a kind of light. It may only be a moment for you, but for us it has been 150 years. Because of our unexpected growth, a large amount of energy has accumulated in your body. Before the energy went out of control, your subconscious pulled you into this space. Do you understand? Black Thea raised her chin at her and rolled her eyes at the faraway Arthas. Time is also light? What kind of theory is this? Although Thea did not understand, she did not want to dwell on these theoretical questions. She just wanted to get out as soon as possible. Then how do I get out? It's easy to get out. Just focus your mind. However, your energy outside is about to go out of control. Have you thought about that? Black Thea looked at her original body as if to say, You're about to die, hurry up and beg me. Thea valued life and death so much that she did not hesitate. She hugged Black Thea and cried. Her acting skills were so good that Arthas, who was not far away, was dumbfounded. The doppelganger was also shocked by the original body's lack of integrity. She stammered. You can combine with that foreign horse over there to release the excess energy. She struggled to break free from the original body's embrace and pointed her middle finger at Arthas. You have to maintain your sense of self. Otherwise, you will be led astray by her Chinibu personality when you combine. She did not wait for a reply and disappeared from her sight like a puff of smoke. Homogeneous personality? I really don't know. Thea rubbed her chin as she thought. There were a lot of secrets to this bloodline talent. However, she did not have time to think about it. She turned to look at the foreign horse with a suspicious gaze. Arthas did not wait for her to ask and quickly went through the main points. Thea memorized it very quickly and had no problem repeating it once. She quickly left this strange space. When her consciousness returned to her body, she was instantly dazzled by the strong light that filled the spaceship. She had a physique that could absorb light. Even she found it dazzling, let alone the others. Gideon, hurry up and scan. What the hell is that? Rip Hunt was still trying to find the cause. He had come to Vandal Savage with the determination to fight to the death. Now that such a thing had happened as soon as he stepped into the other party's doorstep, he was about to go crazy. Gideon's voice was obviously slower than usual. He said in a tone that sounded like he was about to crash. The energy field in the spaceship was too strong. His scanning line could not even get close before it was assimilated. He could not figure out what the situation was. Even the omnipotent artificial intelligence could not figure it out. Rip Hunt was completely at his wits' end. Captain, this is like a nuclear fission reaction. Is there a problem with some of the ship's equipment? As a leading figure in the world of nuclear energy, the fat old man felt like he was about to be burned. After all, he was the other half of the firestorm, a fierce person who could directly absorb the energy of a nuclear reactor. Now even he could feel the drastic change in heat energy. One could only imagine how strong the energy overflow was. Rip was even more devastated. My ship is made of futuristic technology. How could it be powered by nuclear energy? But at least it was a direction to investigate. Gideon, report the ship's damage. The artificial intelligence was very quick this time. Captain, the power room is 17% damaged. The quantum neural chipset is severely damaged. Entering manual operation mode. The propulsion room is unknown. It is recommended that Mr. Jackson enter for inspection. Also, Gideon blabbered on and on, as if the spaceship was about to explode. Just as Rip Hunt was about to despair, he changed his tone and asked, Captain, I have good news and bad news. The bad news. The old captain was very experienced when it came to his own artificial intelligence. At the same time, he was prepared for the worst. The bad news is that because of the overflow of energy, our ship has already left stealth mode. The moment we appeared at this time, Vandal Savage had already discovered us. Not bad. Rip could accept this result. It didn't matter if they were discovered. His ship was about to explode. Given the choice of dying without anyone looking, or rising to the heavens in front of everyone, most people would choose the latter. Chapter 160. Amidst the blinding white light, Captain Han suppressed his discomfort and shouted at the top of his lungs, What's the good news? The good news is that the light is too strong. Vandal's army can't aim at us. We've already escaped from their encirclement, but if we don't find the source of the light, they'll definitely catch up to us. Gideon tried to sound relaxed, but it still put a lot of pressure on them. As the culprit, Miss Thea had just run out of the bloodline space and overheard their conversation. She originally planned to play dumb, but it seemed that things had gotten a little out of hand. She wasn't the type to shirk her responsibility. Although she didn't know beforehand, she still admitted her mistake. I'm sorry everyone. This seems to be caused by me, I'll solve it immediately. Miss Thea. Several different voices sounded at the same time. They were confused, puzzled, and surprised. Miss Thea, how did you do it? You should know that your current energy reaction is far beyond a 5-ton uranium fission chain reactor. This doesn't conform to the principles of physics. The fat old man sitting next to Thea closed his eyes and rambled on about the formula of nuclear energy conversion to heat energy. Professor, please tell her to stop this kind of behavior first. Our spaceship can't hold on any longer. Rip Hunter interrupted his incessant questioning. He was helpless against the fat old man's unreasonable demand for the truth. Look at the situation. If you guys continue chatting for another 2 minutes, the spaceship will be burned to ashes. Thea naturally wouldn't be so unreliable as to chat with the old man. She had already summoned Arthas, and the two were having their first exchange of thoughts, preparing for the fusion. She was different from the flame storm formed by the fat old man and the black young man. They were two different entities that were trying to synchronize. On his side, whether it was Arthas or Black Thea, they were all a part of her. Light didn't represent justice, and darkness didn't represent evil. The two substances were just external manifestations of her. In the end, no matter who she was still herself. Her fusion was just an almost infinite amplification of one of her characteristics. A mysterious incantation came out of her mouth. Although they were on the brink of death, this was magic. The few people present couldn't help but listen. However, it didn't take long for them to realize that they couldn't understand this language at all. It was like a whisper full of ethereal emptiness. Every word could be heard clearly, as if someone was chanting it in their ears. Captain, Miss Thea seems to be emitting some kind of special sound wave. This frequency seems to produce a kind of inert wave. He was interrupted by Rip's words. The old captain didn't care about the theory behind this, he just wanted it all to end so that he could escape. Was he afraid that people couldn't see such a big light bulb hanging in the sky? Although Thea was in the midst of her first fusion and the incantation was a bit lengthy, she wasn't completely unaware of the outside world. She almost laughed out loud at Gideon's unrelenting attempt to use science to forcefully explain magic. It was a good thing that he didn't have a worldview, otherwise he would have shattered into pieces. Magic, as the name implied, was the language of the devil. In the beginning, humans continuously tried to communicate with the demon realm and finally brought this language to the material realm. The number of mages who died in this process was uncountable. Some of them were just seeking death, but there were also some who were willing to fall into the abyss for the sake of humanity's strength. Through their continuous sacrifice, this language full of magic was finally brought to this world, and all kinds of mages and occultists were born. Great Mage Merlin wasn't the founder, but he still made great contributions. This was recorded in the first trial of the secret realm. The spell Thea was chanting now was more of an improved version of the secret technique. It was different from traditional magic, and the effect of the language was much lower. Otherwise, these guys would have gone crazy with their ears perked up at such a close distance. Come, my friend. Thea stretched out her right hand to Arthas, and the two looked at each other. Arthas took 2 steps back and revealed its true form. It was an adult unicorn with a shoulder width of 2 meters and a height of nearly 3 meters. It had a silver-white mane and a 30-centimeter long horn on its forehead that flashed with a wonderful light. There were also 2 pure white wings on the horse's abdomen. As it slowly retreated, its majestic body swayed beautifully. Thea opened her arms, and the unicorn didn't hesitate and ran quickly. At this moment, time and space lost its meaning. The two could only see each other. Courage, hope and expectation constantly flashed in the unicorn's eyes. Thea nodded silently and opened her heart to accept these noble qualities. Ah! The unicorn seemed to have rushed over from 10,000 meters away and fiercely plunged into her body, completing the last step of the fusion. The huge kinetic energy made Thea unconsciously take 2 steps back. Magic power, an almost endless amount of magic power. From the depths of her soul, spirit, and body constantly poured out, and the blood flowing in her veins was completely replaced by the golden blood full of magic. Thea only felt that she could win. No matter who she faced, she could win. If the original level was set at 10, now it was 1,000. Compared to the Superman she met before, Thea didn't know if he used his full strength at that time, but she believed that she was now stronger than the Superman at that time. She might not be able to crush him, but she could definitely beat him. For a moment she was smug, and couldn't wait to punch Superman, kick Steel Bones and elbow the Martian hunter. Unfortunately, her good mood only lasted for less than 10 seconds. Beautiful, right? Happy, right? While you can still use it to your heart's content. The unicorn transformed back into its human form in her consciousness, and the heroic and domineering aura it had just now was gone. It spoke lazily. What do you mean? Thea was a little confused. We're going to be invincible soon. Why are you pouring cold water on me? You know, you're also a part of me. The mystery of time is far beyond your imagination. No one can take advantage of time. You accidentally obtained power in this time and space. If you return to your original time and space, you'll be beaten back to your original form. Of course, you can choose not to return. Arthas spoke very slowly. In order to express it clearly, many words were carefully chosen, and the tone was much more serious. If she returned, she would be beaten back to her original form. If she didn't return, she could be the king of this world. Thea hesitated for a second before making a choice. She had to go back. Her family and friends were all there. The heroes in 2166 had all died of old age. No one would appreciate her being invincible. Sigh. She sighed. No matter what, she enjoyed it in advance. She would slowly bask in the sun when she returned. She didn't know if she could reach this level of power in her lifetime. Don't worry, you and I share our lives. We can live for at least 4,000 years. Thea felt much better after hearing that. 4,000 years. The tree on Superman's grave must have died of old age. That's great, that's beautiful. Chapter 161. Although her mind was wandering, her hands didn't stop. She kept chanting spells and gradually took back the dissipating energy. It was unrealistic to directly take it back into her body. The energy was too violent, and she didn't dare to absorb it without purification. Captain, Miss Thea has controlled the energy source. We're saved. Gideon's tone returned from the slight urgency just now to the usual calm tone. Well, why do I feel like everything is still white? Miss Thea, please hurry up. Rip Hunt's heart was about to break into pieces. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have let Thea on board. She was too much of a troublemaker. Thea was busy carving the magic circle. Such a huge amount of energy required an extremely high-end magic circle. The magic circle structure was knowledge brought over by Earthies after the fusion. She had to study it and draw it at the same time. Naturally, she couldn't be that fast. Don't worry, it'll be done soon. Who knew when it would be done? But to tell the truth, she was learning as she worked. These people were going crazy. In order to give them some hope, Thea told a small lie. Fortunately, as time went by and Thea carved 2 simple shrinking magic circles, part of the energy dissipated into the atmosphere, and a small part of the remaining energy in the spaceship was absorbed by her. The Legends of Tomorrow team finally returned to the normal world from the world of light. At this time, the level of strength of these people could be seen. Next to Thea, the fat old man and the black guy not far away had shockingly high fire resistance, perhaps because of the firestorm. After the strong light disappeared, the two rubbed their eyes and recovered. Although the naturally airhead Kendra was a weak little chicken, she was still a priestess of the Egyptian god Horus in her previous life. She might have enjoyed some divinity residue in her daily worship. Although the residue didn't affect her combat ability, it was extremely resistant to all kinds of abnormal conditions. She looked around in a daze, not knowing what had happened. The others were ordinary people. The Atom Man carried a suit with him and immediately put it on when he felt something was wrong. The thermo-optical sensing transmission system, ion mass spectrometer stabilizer, carbonated polyester lenses were all turned on. With a lot of advanced technology, he was the first to recover among all the ordinary people. The remaining few who had neither mutated nor had any technological equipment were in a miserable state. Sarah and Rip Hunter were a little further away. Their reactions were rather fast, so they weren't affected by it. On the other hand, the 2 criminals in Central City were unlucky. They were only separated from Thea by the fat old man's seat. Heatwave's skin was thick, and he was an arsonist, so his heat output was more or less enhanced by his profession. Although he was sweating profusely, his mind was still clear. At this time he was staring at Thea with wide eyes. His little buddy, Captain Lung Han, was in a very bad situation at this time. This person was not strong at all. He was wearing a down jacket in the hottest days of the year. You could tell how bad his physique was. Now that he was hit by this energy wave that didn't have any radiation or shock waves but was emitting a terrifying power, he was in a terrible state. The heat wave caused him to sweat profusely to expel the excess heat from his body. He was sweating profusely, and his bodily functions were almost in disorder. His breathing was weak and the whites of his eyes, which usually looked like a lone wolf, were rolling up. Quick, Gideon, prepare the emergency room. Seeing his partner's miserable state, Heatwave didn't have time to be angry with Thea. He carried Captain Lung Han and ran to the emergency room. Thea was just about to say that she already had healing spells, and this kind of injury could be healed with a Bayou. But she knew that she had made a big mistake. She obediently continued to squat in the corner and draw circles. No, draw circles. Whoosh! After drawing 5 more circles, she finally gathered all the overflowing energy. She just needed to purify it a little and she could absorb it again. After finishing her work, Thea got up and apologized to them. She had made such a big mistake, so no matter what, she had to do something. At this time, her identity as Green Arrow's sister played a big role. Even though Rip Hunter's face was a little ugly, he reluctantly accepted her apology. Heatwave carried Captain Lung away to treat his injuries. The rest were all heroes on the side of justice. Everyone was very magnanimous, or rather tolerant. Look at how the Flash caused such a big incident in Flashpoint. It was such a big mess, and other people only said a few words, but no one had ever heard of a hero clamoring to kill the Flash as a sacrifice to their flag. If this incident had been caused by a villain, the battle would have been going on for 5 minutes. So, the identity of the side of justice was still very useful. As long as you were still on the side of justice, everyone's tolerance was very high. At the same time, this also had to do with Thea's energy attribute. Sunlight, light attribute. It sounded like a friend of justice. This was a misjudgment caused by the narrow worldview of Westerners. They all thought that light was justice and darkness was evil. If Superman lay in the graveyard and absorbed ghost energy every day, forget about doing one good deed a day, it would be useless no matter how many good deeds he did. There would be a large number of righteous people who would crusade against him. These people always liked to use their own inherent logic to measure everything. What was the same as their understanding was right and the opposite was wrong. Thea couldn't comment on this kind of universal value, but as someone with vested interests she wouldn't explain. "Thea, what are you wearing? And your hair?" asked Sarah Lance as soon as she regained her vision and noticed Thea's abnormality. The rest of the team looked over in unison. Why did you change your clothes in such a short time?" "Armor." Thea's current appearance could be described as a huge change in the eyes of the team. The original red Kevlar was nowhere to be seen. Now the main color of her body was gold and red. The most eye-catching thing was the shoulder guards on both sides of her shoulders. They were gold in color with a red satin lining. Mysterious runes would appear on the surface of the shoulder guards from time to time. There were also 2 small swords embedded on each shoulder guard. The arm guards and chest guards were also gold in color. Overall, they looked dignified and majestic. The leg guards were different from the traditional chainmail. Instead, it was a battle skirt with a red base and golden leaves hanging from it. The expressions of the legendary squad members were different, but the meaning in their eyes was similar. "Is it really okay for you to wear such a traditional and magical armor on our sci-fi spaceship?" Since they could see the abnormality, Thea naturally noticed it long ago. According to Arthas' original words, this rather flashy armor was a free gift. It would automatically be worn during fusion, and would disappear once the fusion was removed. Originally, Arthas even suggested that since the fusion was complete, shouldn't the name be combined as well? "What do you think about SARS?" Thea spat on her face. "What's with your sister?" "My name is so catchy, sire, that's. Won't I be called Cervantes in a few days? Are you cursing me to death?" Thea rejected the name that could easily cause misunderstandings. Chapter 162. As the host, it wasn't impossible to refuse, but stubbornly refusing would easily lower the synchronization rate of both sides, so Thea had no choice but to compromise. For example, the silver-white long cloak behind her that dragged to the ground. A long cloak, a long cloak. Important things had to be said 3 times. Despite her reluctance, she had no choice but to loudly proclaim that she was also a hero with a cloak. To be honest, this cloak was very beautiful. It was similar to a combination of a haori and a navy coat from One Piece. On the back of the cloak, there were countless golden threads depicting a winged unicorn flying high in the sky. Thea had secretly taken a look at it before, and it wasn't bad. The drawing style was realistic, majestic, and full of strength. If it was a cute spitting head portrait, she would rather die than wear it. "Actually, this is my family's emblem. My fusion with Professor Stein and the others is similar. I only became like this because I fused with a creature." As Thea spoke, she showed the pattern on the cloak to them. Whether they believed it or not, this was the answer anyway. When they saw the unicorn, their original sense of right and wrong jumped out. A unicorn. A legendary divine beast, needless to say, it must be of the good side. "Thea is a true friend. We believe you." Thea wiped the non-existent sweat on her forehead, finally explaining. This was a unicorn. If it was a giant octopus or something, they would definitely have to ask for another 10 minutes. Seeing that she was fine, Rip Hunter carefully ordered the tanned youth and the fat old man to check the damage of the spaceship. Thea's mistake wasn't light, and the spaceship's interior was fragile. Even the usually talkative Gideon didn't say anything, so it was obvious that something was wrong. While waiting for them to check, the heat wave pushed Captain Lung back. Of course, it wasn't that he was seriously injured, but that he was a normal person who frequently came into contact with frost rays, which caused him to lose some of his cells. This time he was dehydrated by Thea's enormous heat source. Furthermore, it was a blessing in disguise. The intense radiation had eliminated more than half of the freezing radiation that had accumulated in his body over the years. Many of the damaged cells had also been revitalized. Having received such a great benefit, he naturally couldn't continue cursing. He also felt that he couldn't beat Thea in a fight, so he weakly returned to his seat and closed his eyes to rest, waiting for Rip's arrangements. He could hide his physical condition from others, but not from Thea. After merging with her body, her spiritual power was almost limitless. As long as it was within her sight, she could sense it. Thea glanced at it casually. She was a little surprised because her observation was more detailed. Captain Frigid's cells and the residual frost radiation had fused a little because of her intervention. She lowered her head and thought for a moment. Then she walked up to him and organized her words. "Your cells." Before she could finish, she was interrupted by Heatwave. "Get lost." Thea was a little angry. "Are you done? Did I give you face?" Her originally pretty face instantly changed. "What did you say? I didn't hear you clearly. Say it again." Following her anger, visible ripples appeared around her. Floating objects were constantly suspended in the air, and the air seemed to show signs of freezing. "Captain, the magnetic reaction in the air." Gideon's voice came from an unknown corner, but it was rudely interrupted by Thea. "Shut up." Thea didn't say anything. She only looked at Heatwave coldly. She was now in an invincible position. Artificial intelligence, Vandal Savage, these people were no match for her. Heatwave wasn't an idiot. She had made such a big commotion. Although he was a little afraid, he had to admit that this person had one good thing about him, and that was his tenacity. He looked back at her without showing any signs of weakness. His meaning was clear. "You can kill me if you want, but I won't bow down." "Thea, don't." Sarah hurriedly came over to stop the two. In fact, she was mainly trying to stop Thea. Although Heatwave didn't admit defeat, he wasn't going to court death. His eyes were wide open, but he didn't move at all. Thea was very impressed with Sarah's future achievements. She still had to give her face. She nodded, ignoring Heatwave, who was gnashing his teeth. She said to Captain Lung, "You should check carefully. There's something wrong with the genetic chain in your body. If there's no accident, you're going to become a psychic soon." After that, she walked to the side and sat down without waiting for his reply. "What?" Captain Lung was a little confused. He was already top-heavy. Just now, when his best friend wanted to fight with Thea, he gave Sarah a look and stopped the fight that could have ended in a second. "Now you're suddenly telling me that I'm going to have a son? No, I have a psychic power?" He wanted to ask for more details, but Thea ignored him and walked away. Captain Lung had no choice but to ask someone else for help. Gideon. This black-bellied artificial intelligence had the most information on the entire ship. "Mr. Snart, Miss Thea is right. Your genetic chain is undergoing some kind of mutation. I'm sorry, but there's no specific information in the database." Damn, it doesn't understand what this means, right? Captain Lung could only continue to look at the others. He counted the heads and looked around. He found that the people on the ship didn't know such high-end knowledge. He could only give Sarah, who had a little spark with him recently, a look. He pointed at Thea with his chin. The meaning was simple. "There's someone over there who knows. Help me ask." Sarah hesitated when she saw Captain Lung's look. She didn't know how much her face was worth to Thea. After all, this Thea was too different from the one she remembered. After thinking about it, she decided to ask. Asking one more question wouldn't kill her. When she took 2 steps, Thea's words entered their ears very clearly. "There are 2 ways. One is to use time to wait for the genetic chain to stabilize. It will take about 3 years. The other is that I use high-energy light to illuminate him and accelerate the fusion of the cells and the freezing rays. However, it will consume a certain amount of his lifespan. You guys decide." Sarah and Captain Lung looked at each other and lowered their heads in thought. Before they could make up their minds, Rip Hunter interrupted them. Miss Thea, you're not going to use that kind of light again, are you? After receiving an affirmative answer, the old captain almost fainted. Are you kidding me? My ship is going to be scrapped. However, it was not appropriate to reject them directly. Captain Lung, Heatwave, and Sarah were all important combat forces. Captain Lung and Sarah's battle brains were also the best in the entire team. The rest of the team was not as reliable as the three of them. The two scientists were jokers. The black guy was a mechanic half a year ago, and the eagle girl was washing dishes in a cafe half a year ago. Superpowers. What a high and mighty name. If he stopped them, it wouldn't just be a matter of being friends. These people would really turn hostile. Rip Hunter could only persuade them in a roundabout way. Chapter 163. Hey you guys, shouldn't we avoid Vandal Savage's pursuers first? We'll discuss your matters after we land on the ground? No one objected to his suggestion. Captain Frostbite also had to consider whether it was worth it to exchange his uncertain lifespan for a superpower that could be obtained when the time was up. We're going to capture Vandal Savage at the gathering tonight. Miss Thea, do you have any suggestions? Rip only remembered that there was a god beside him after assigning the mission, so he hurriedly asked with a smile. Thea was now a little tired of these guys who had no superpowers but had lived for a long time. It was a waste of food. This Vandal wasn't even as good as a ninja master. This guy had lived for 4,000 years and all he knew was throwing knives. He didn't know anything else. She felt that she could crush him with just a breath. The difference in strength was so great that any strategy would be useless. However, Thea was still thinking about Gideon's trick. If she went over and killed the enemy in a matter of seconds, they would be able to pick up the head and loot the equipment? How could there be such a good thing? But on second thought, if she returned to her original time and space and was beaten back to her original form, it would be a waste if she didn't fight a few times with such great power. Her eagerness to fight washed away all her unhappiness. I'll go with you. Thea said this very calmly, but her tone was firm and not one for discussion. Old Captain Rip Hunt couldn't wait for her to come along. He didn't refuse at all and finalized the plan of action. In the evening, Rip brought Sarah, Heatwave, and Thea, the max-level main account, to the gathering. Although Thea's son Mark's power would be weakened at night, her energy base was huge, so she didn't care about that little bit. Originally, Captain Frostbite was about to follow them, but Thea coldly said, "Don't touch the freeze gun." That made him retreat instantly. Before leaving, Rip was about to get a few Vandal guards' clothes so that he could blend into the gathering, but Thea stopped him. No need to go through so much trouble. Her right hand instantly drew a few mysterious runes. A few transparent rays of light fell on the three of them. The three of them looked at each other and touched each other. They didn't feel any changes in their bodies. Darkness can make you invisible, but so can sunlight. My spell can continuously absorb light. Other than the few of us, no one can see you. Looking at their confused looks, Sia gave them a rough explanation. She sighed inwardly. It was really hard for them to switch from science to magic all of a sudden. Rip Hunt was in disbelief. He ran back to the spaceship and got Gideon to scan the area with all sorts of rays. The results left him on the verge of a mental breakdown. The place he was standing on was empty. Regardless of whether he accepted it or not, this was the truth. He could only temporarily give up on his efforts to save his worldview and focus on killing Vandal. Due to his return, they were delayed for some time, so the three of them ran to the meeting point. That's right, it was 3 people. Miss Thea was now flying leisurely in the sky. She had 2 ways of flying. One was to use the unicorn's wings, but she always felt that her image was a bit similar to that of Eagle Hero and Eagle Maiden. The other was to use her own powerful strength to lift her body up and move quickly. Although the second way was a bit rough, it was still pretty. Thea even purposely assumed Superman's classic pose as she flew around in the sky. Her super speed created afterimages that formed the letter I. Then the letter I. Awesome! It was no wonder that Superman and Supergirl could be compared to the clouds in the sky. Their happiness came from comparison. Compared to the 3 fellows on the ground who were panting as they ran, their sense of superiority was surging out. Seeing how hard they were running, Thea raised her hand and cast a wind-walking spell on them. After a series of clattering noises, the 3 of them were agile people. They quickly adapted to the super high speed and finally arrived at the meeting point. At this moment, we are standing at the edge of history. The past victories are indeed memorable, but only by winning the final battle will you be remembered. For victory. For immortality. On the stage, Vandal Savage gave a hysterical speech. A large group of people in black helmets and black clothes raised their right arms in unison, echoing him loudly. If it weren't for the fact that these people didn't shout "Hail Hydra," Thea would have thought that she had come to the wrong set. However, this scene looked like the mobilization scene of Red Skull. Such a similar scene could only mean that these guys were using the same teaching material, right? It wasn't difficult for Vandal to recognize. Not to mention that he had just made a 500-word mobilization report. There were so many people in black clothes and carrying rifles. Only a man and a woman were standing in front with their faces exposed. Vandal was a priest, and considering his unrequited love for Eagle Maiden, the woman was automatically excluded. Although ancient Egypt was considered liberal, and there was nothing wrong with men and women, they weren't so casual with the gods. If two female priests were together, wouldn't the gods explode? And let them reincarnate 206 times? Dream on. Is this bearded man the target? Thea whispered to Rip Hunt. The old captain's eyes were full of hatred. He pursed his lips and didn't speak. He just nodded. Then I'll take him down. You guys wait. Thea looked at him for a long time and couldn't see what was so powerful about this guy. Even in her normal state, she could kill him. This guy probably relied on his immortality to occupy a place among the villains. You. Rip wanted to say something, but Thea had already broken through the sound barrier and rushed in front of Vandal. She swung her fist, afraid that she would kill him with too much strength, so she only used 10% of her strength. It had to be said that Vandal had lived for so many years and had a lot of experience. His brain didn't even react, and his body was already rolling on the ground like a lazy donkey. Thea's probing punch landed directly on the guard behind him. The guard looked at the huge hole in his chest in shock, and fell to the ground dead without a sound. It wasn't until he lay on the ground that a large amount of blood began to flow from his wound. Go. Vandal grabbed the hand of the woman beside him, and at the same time took out a remote control and pressed it hard. Boom! Boom! The continuous explosions distracted Thea's attention. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw that the crowded square had suddenly become hell on earth. Large amounts of broken limbs were blown into the sky, and flames were gathering in the area from all directions. What's going on? This guy can see through my magic? Did he discover Rip and the others? But soon Thea understood that this guy didn't see anything. He was betting with superhero logic that she would save people, even if it was an enemy from before. This guy hit the nail on the head and he was right. The heat wave didn't matter, but Sarah and Rip had to be saved. Chapter 164. Thea could only look at him in disdain and quickly fly back. Vandal laughed, thinking that he had succeeded. He pressed a switch on the side, and a hidden passage appeared. He pulled the woman into it. Heatwave and Rip were easy to find, but Sarah was small and the scene was chaotic. Thea searched for 3 whole minutes before she found her in a pile of people. She quickly pulled her out and checked her breathing. She was still alive. After putting the 3 of them in a safe area, Thea didn't know what to do. This guy was unbelievably decisive. He threw away so many of his loyal subordinates just like that. Or perhaps he had predicted that Rip and the others would come and cause trouble, and planted a huge amount of explosives in advance. Otherwise, it didn't make sense why he would plant explosives under the feet of his loyal subordinates. No matter how weird his brain was, he wouldn't do something like that. After him. Rip's morale was actually quite high. He ordered Heatwave to bring the unconscious Sarah back to the ship for treatment while he followed Thea to find Vandal. Thea was a little speechless when she saw Rip pull out the small pistol. You must have seen how powerful I am and wanted me to bring you to kill a boss. Your acting was a little exaggerated. You were too enthusiastic. But she had nothing to fear now. The sooner she dealt with it, the sooner she could go home. The 2 of them were very experienced. They went to the place where Vandal disappeared and began searching. The secret door switch was quickly found, but when they flipped the switch, they saw a huge metal door. I didn't find any lock on it at all. This door is single use. Once it's closed, it can't be opened again. Thea kept using magic to check it. There was no password lock, fingerprint lock, or pupil lock. It was just a metal door that was cast in one piece. It was usually open but closed at critical moments. The door could only be used once. This guy's brain was wired differently from a normal person. Had he been thinking about how to escape for the past 4,000 years? Blowing up all his subordinates to make a single-use door? No normal person would have that kind of brain. Rip Hunt fumbled with the door for a long time. He said uncertainly, "This is made from boron nitride and a large amount of osmium composite metal." He turned to Thea. "Can you break it? This is the strongest alloy in the 22nd century. How am I supposed to know?" Thea was a little depressed. She flew around the entire venue twice. Although she did not have the X-ray vision of Superman, she could still estimate the direction and layout of the underground passage with her magic antennae. The result of the observation could only be described as very good and very powerful. For some unknown reason, this vandal had hollowed out the entire underground. The outer layer was thick rock, and the inner layer was made of a metal that Thea could not recognize. The innermost layer was made of the same material as the door. "This is a tortoise shell." Thea explained to Rip what she saw. "Do you have any weapons on your ship that can penetrate this shell?" Rip immediately contacted the Waverider, but the result was very depressing. Gideon's original words were that they could theoretically get through, but they were currently being chased by a giant emerald robot that was over 200 meters tall, so they had to think of a way to deal with it first. The handsome old captain spread his hands, indicating that he had done his best. The rest was up to her heroine. Phew. Thea let out a long sigh. She had been looking forward to a hearty battle, not a demolition. She could only contact Arthas, who was sleeping in the space of consciousness. Hey, stop sleeping. Do we only have armor? Did you bring your own weapons?" "Sister, I'm a unicorn, not a lion or a tiger. I'm a beast of peace. My weapon is only a horn, but our fusion is not deep enough, so you can't use it," Arthas said after understanding the general situation. The two of them had discussed the fusion before. The so-called deep fusion meant that Thea had completely accepted her values. This was something that Thea could not accept. She did not want to become an incomparably bright and naive justice person. She only wanted to be herself. It was not impossible to break down the door empty-handed, but it would be a little stupid. She did not have a body of steel, so she could not do such a crude job. Some technical means were needed. Although there were not many people who used the light element in battle, it was not impossible. Thea immediately thought of Admiral Khazar's powerful skill, Kusanagi Cloud Sword. Her left hand was placed on her right wrist, constantly gathering the light elements in her body into her hand. With the concentration of a large amount of energy, Thea compressed it twice. The originally transparent mass of light gradually turned golden, and even faintly produced a trace of electric arc. Almost there, any more compression and it would explode. Thea stopped while she was ahead. Her left hand gently stroked the mass of light, and at the same time, both of her hands stretched out to both sides. In less than 30 seconds, an incomparably dazzling long sword was completed. She gently waved it twice. It seemed a little light. Fortunately, she was only using it temporarily, so she did not have to worry about its weight. "Captain, stay away." Thea left this sentence and began to fly away. After flying for about 2 kilometers, she felt that it was about time. She changed her direction, raised the light sword high, and rushed towards the metal door with all her strength. A huge sonic boom had just sounded, and she had already rushed forward, stabbing the metal door with the sword. The earth shook, and the whole land was shaken by her violent impact. The light sword was instantly broken, but the impact still caused incomparable damage to the metal door. The previously smooth and thick door was violently hit by her, creating a large hole with a diameter of 2 meters and a depth of half a meter. Thea rubbed her head and stood up, carefully observing her results. There was only one conclusion. This door was too damn thick. Could it be that the thickness, length, and width of the door were the same? Thea looked at the metal door that was 3 meters long and wide, and there was a bit of unconcealable bitterness in her eyes. Forget it, this kind of suicidal impact is a bit dangerous. Let's just dig a hole. She gathered another Kusanagi Cloud Sword. This time she did not run, but stood in place and dug along the hole just now. She was very depressed here, but Vandal Savage, who was hiding in his turtle shell, was almost desperate. At first, this bunker was designed by his most outstanding civil engineer, who used a lot of manpower and material resources in the city to build it. The cost was simply incalculable. But just now, Xia's attack had shaken the shelter that he thought was impenetrable. This caused his originally solid confidence to collapse by more than half in an instant. Following that, Thea did not stop digging. The sound of her digging could not be hidden from him. He called up the real-time monitoring of the indoor computer and found that the overall damage of the metal door had reached 45%. The enemy was about to come in. It was not that he had not encountered such a powerful enemy in his 4,000 years of life, but as far as he knew, those superheroes should have died of old age. Where did this guy come from today? Chapter 165. As Thea's actions became faster and faster, he became more and more anxious. He looked at the few staff members around him with a murderous gaze and pulled out a throwing knife at lightning speed. With a few dull thuds, he killed everyone in the room except for himself and the woman beside him. "Father, what are you doing?" The woman asked her father, who she used to worship, with a puzzled expression. Vandal walked over and gave her a loving hug. He whispered in her ear, "Daughter, I'm sorry." His gaze quickly turned from gentle to ferocious. A dagger with a strange pattern was stabbed into her abdomen and stirred twice. Why? Oh. She fell into a pool of blood with deep confusion. "I didn't want this to happen. This is your fate." Vandal closed his eyes and turned his back to his daughter, who admired him. Not long after, he returned to normal. He pulled out an unconscious young man from a compartment in the basement. If the legendary squad were here, they would definitely recognize that this was the Hawkman who died not long ago, the reincarnated lover of the Hawkgirl. For the legendary squad who traveled through the river of time, only a few months had passed. But for Vandal, it was a solid 100 years. He spent a lot of effort and found this young man 30 years ago, the 207th reincarnation of the Hawkman. Listening to the vibrations outside the door that were getting clearer, he did not hesitate anymore. He lowered his head and dipped it in his daughter's blood, and drew an unusually complicated circle on the ground. Time passed by slowly. Vandal's daughter had completely breathed her last. The blood that flowed out of her body turned from bright red to dark red. Finally, just as the blood was about to coagulate, he finished drawing the circle. Panting heavily, the circle consumed a lot of his energy. There was no room for mistakes. Even with his 4,000 years of experience, he drew it with trepidation. Fortunately, he finished it successfully. The blood of a loved one. Vandal chanted the first half of the ritual softly. As his voice was transmitted to the circle, the pattern drawn with blood instantly came alive. There were bursts of light flashing in it from time to time. Thea, who was still digging outside, immediately felt that something was wrong. This was too wrong. The air was filled with a restless aura. The birds on the nearby branches had collectively flown away. Should they continue digging or observe the situation? Thea asked for Rip Hunter's opinion. Even though Rip didn't sense anything, the two quickly came to an agreement. A gentleman wouldn't stand under a collapsing wall. Let's watch from afar. What if the enemy used some kind of suicidal move? How dangerous would that be? At most, he could just travel through time again. It was not a big deal. At this moment, Vandal could not care less about the enemy's escape. His ritual had already entered the second stage. The blood of one's kin and the life of one's enemy are all contributed to the two ends of the scale. Me, High Priest of Horus, Vandal Savage, prays for the gaze of my lord. After a full 10 minutes, just as Vandal felt that the ritual was beginning to absorb his immortal life force, a mysterious power finally projected a near-omnipresent gaze from the depths of the multiverse. This line of sight was very faint and weak, almost between existence and non-existence. It barely sent a signal to Vandal, with praise and encouragement. Vandal was about to die from exhaustion. His life force had been greatly drained. If it had been an ordinary person, they would have died long ago. He was cursing in his heart. I haven't used it once in 4,000 years. It's so difficult to summon you for the first time. Can you do it or not? But the arrow had already been knocked. He trembled as he completed the last step of the ritual. He reached out a hand and aimed at his left eye. His heart was full of hesitation. There was no small matter when it came to the gods. As long as he sacrificed it, the eye would not grow back even if he was reborn. But his hesitation was immediately felt by the gaze. The message sent became more and more impatient and dissatisfied. Gritting his teeth and stomping his foot, Vandal aimed at his left eye and dug it out. Ah! The excruciating pain almost made him faint. But he still had some rationality left. He threw the bloody left eye into the ritual. I sacrifice my eye. I pray for the guardian of the pharaoh, the symbol of royalty, the eagle god Horus, the eye of all worlds. Destroy these fugitives of time, the destroyers of world order. Vandal's last few words were almost roared out. There was no other way. He was too weak. His face that used to be 40 years old now looked like he was 80 years old. One had to know that he had maintained the appearance of a 40-year-old man for 4,000 years without any change. Now a ritual had sucked away his nearly limitless life force. In addition, he had lost an eye and a daughter. His sacrifice was really too great. Thea naturally did not know about his sacrifice. Even if she knew, she would not take it seriously. Because at this time she was already a little shocked. In the sky and on the earth, ancient sounds kept echoing. A faint eagle cry kept circling in everyone's mind. Rip Hunt of the Church of Science also saw that things were getting worse, but he did not know what it meant. He could only ask Thea, who seemed to know a lot. If it was any other question, Thea would not be able to answer. After the fusion, she only gained some knowledge about unicorns. That knowledge was passed down through her bloodline. Not only was there little, but it was also very biased. But Thea could still recognize the current scene. As the representative of the heavenly realm's creatures, even if she had not seen it, she had at least heard of it. Facing Rip Hunt's inquisitive gaze, she gritted her teeth and said with a bit of bitterness, "This is the omen of a god's descent." Walla walla. Rip Hunt could only hear the sound of his worldview shattering. Are you kidding me? It's already the year 2166, we're already using space-based weapons, and you're telling me about a god? Aren't we living in an era of science and technology? Was all the knowledge I learned in school fake? No one would know or care about the screams in his heart. Thea solemnly looked at the sky not far away. The clouds there were already covered by a kind of high-density energy. The air was constantly rubbing against each other, creating large amounts of electric arcs. Just as the energy gathered and finally reached a certain point, a pair of sharp claws suddenly reached out. Although it was very difficult and slow, as if the claws were tearing something, they still managed to tear a large hole in the energy. Miss Thea, should we? Rip Hunt received information from the Wave Rider. The Atom Man had killed the big robot sent by Vandal at the cost of serious injuries. The spaceship was quickly approaching and was preparing to make a strategic turn. Thea was not that anxious. After repeated comparisons, if this god was only at this level, she really did not have to be afraid of him. Gods sounded nice, but in reality they were life forms that were much higher than ordinary people, so they were called gods. Comparing life forms, Thea was now a half-human, half-world creature. She was definitely inferior to him, but she was not afraid of him. Chapter 166. The pressure of a god had some effect on her, but it wasn't strong. Compared to Rip Hunt, whose lips were trembling and couldn't even speak clearly, Thea's performance was full of the demeanor of a strong person. Captain, go and catch Vandal Savage. He's down there and can't resist anymore. As for this big guy, leave it to me. Thea was amused after she said that. It wasn't because she thought of a joke, but because she felt the excitement in her soul. She smiled with fighting spirit, and her blood was boiling. Finally, there was a worthy opponent. This was a real god. After a good fight, she wouldn't have any regrets even if she returned to the original space-time. The unicorn felt her monstrous fighting spirit and took the initiative to let go of part of its body control, causing Thea's aura to increase by a lot. Rip Hunt also knew that he couldn't stop her and the unicorn. If you want to fight, then fight. I'll go and catch Vandal first. He ordered the Wave Rider to start breaking the door, and it didn't take long before the door was blown open. He ordered the Atom Man, Sarah, and Captain Frigid to guard the house for the 3 seriously injured. The remaining Firestorm and Heatwave Hawkgirl followed him to catch Grandpa Vandal. The cumulus clouds in the sky were getting heavier and heavier. Although the pair of sharp claws used all its power to dispel spells, the effect wasn't significant. At this time it didn't care about the dignity of a god. A hairy leg stretched out from the space and began to squeeze out with all its hands and feet. Thea naturally couldn't just stand by and watch. The villain could do whatever he wanted. She wasn't that stupid. Yes, she felt that she was justice, and the enemy was naturally the villain. That was what she thought and did. After communicating with the unicorn, the original unicorn pattern on the back of the cloak was replaced. Now, 2 large Chinese characters were displayed. Justice. Anyone who went against him was a bad person or a bad god. Run over and kick the enemy back? After thinking about it, she gave up on this tempting idea. The enemy's strength was unknown, and if she was dragged in, she wouldn't be able to cry. Since she couldn't engage in melee combat, she would have to fight from a distance. Although Thea looked like a holy knight with her golden armor, that was just a facade. No matter how strong a unicorn was, she was still a magical creature. Her powerful magic was her only source of strength. Sakasha. Thea immediately cast the strongest spell in the unicorn's memory. Not only did she use hand gestures, even the incantation was much longer than before. As the mana around her gathered, the entire place fell into absolute silence. She and Horace, who was about to cross over to the other world, were like 2 whirlpools, each of them madly absorbing the mana in the air. Horace was not an ordinary person either. Sensing the danger in his body, he exerted more force toward the opening. A small part of his falcon-like head was already exposed. His right eye shone brightly, showing the vast wisdom of a god. His left eye was filled with hatred and hostility as he stared fiercely at Thea. Although it was just a glance, Thea, whose power level was infinitely high, instantly understood the past. Horace's left eye was once passed down to the world. Later on, it was made into a divine artifact, the Eye of Horus. This divine artifact was personally found by him and offered to the god of the underworld, Osiris, for safekeeping. Now, his right eye was the original eye of his divine body, and his left eye was probably Vandal's offering. Could his right eye also be made into a divine artifact? Thea couldn't be blamed for thinking too much. His eyes seemed to be able to see through everything in the world. It was really tempting. Something that even the god of the underworld was interested in must be of a higher level than things like scepters and magic balls. No matter what the situation was, she must keep his eye. At most she could just grab it and run away. As for Vandal's eye, she would leave it to him. Thea was afraid that she would have nightmares if she looked at his fierce gaze. After 3 minutes of chanting, the spell was finally ready. Perhaps this world was a technological world, but the casting of spells was extremely jerky. Otherwise, even if it was the first time Thea cast it, it wouldn't be so strenuous. Burning cloud. She pointed at the figure of Horus in the distance, and a large cloud of fiery red energy instantly covered the god who was trying to climb out. A large amount of heat and light energy gathered in the cloud, and countless explosions occurred every second. The energy after the explosion would not dissipate, but would gather and explode again in the sealed cloud. In theory, the energy could continuously gather and explode, and the enemy's injury would also increase the destructive power of the energy. Although the cloud seemed airtight to the outside world, Thea could see inside as a spellcaster. She didn't know what this god was thinking. Was it because he was too bored? He was so focused on drilling in this direction that he turned a blind eye to the explosion in front of him. A faint layer of light appeared on his body. Although it was so weak that it seemed like it could be blown out by a gust of wind, it persisted in the continuous explosion. Powerful. Sure enough, the power of spells would be greatly reduced against gods. This was the memory inheritance in Merlin's bloodline. His ancestors had most likely done something similar to what Thea was doing today. This was really a good family style. Since direct damage couldn't penetrate you, then let's try direct damage. As a modern person who had been influenced by modern science, her mind was much more active than the ancients. This time there was no need for complicated spells. It was a pure contest of energy. Thea gathered all the light energy in her body between her fingers. After repeatedly compressing it, she pointed 2 fingers at Horus, who was still acting as a target. Magic beam cannon. Well, Thea felt that this move was very similar to the move of a certain national cartoon Demon King. The principle was similar, so she directly borrowed the name of the move. The spiral energy constantly accelerated the main energy beam. At first, the speed was not fast because the energy was too concentrated, but under the continuous acceleration it became faster and faster. Thea and Horus were 2 kilometers apart, but this distance, driven by the spiral energy, almost broke the space barrier. Poof! The energy beam opened a small hole in Horus' divine body, as thick as an adult's finger. Although this was not a serious injury to Horus, who was 5 or 6 meters tall, he could not accept being injured by a mortal. His eagle-like head roared in an unknown language. His entire body began to expand violently, as if he wanted to use this method to forcefully descend. What the hell, I only took a little bit of blood from him. Did he have to go berserk? Thea was definitely not lying. It was a drop of blood. A drop of golden blood flowed out from his wound. The wound healed very quickly and was repaired in an instant. However, the drop of blood fell to the ground uncontrollably. The blood of a god. Thea was a little tempted when she saw the drop point. Generally, this was the foundation of the protagonist's flight, not to mention that this was her own spoils of war. However, it was a little degrading for her to rush over like a hungry dog. In any case, she was now an opponent of the same level as him. Although the gods might not acknowledge her, she had to despise him on the surface and respect him in her heart. After memorizing the drop point of the blood, Thea did not stop and continued to fire. Poof! 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 After 3 consecutive shots, Thea was exhausted. As a target, Horus was even more exhausted. Chapter 167. Thea had no time to pay attention to where the god's blood would land. They must be in the same area. The two were fighting in the air, and the Earth's rotation wasn't that fast. Huff! Huff! She gasped for breath. She had consumed a lot of energy, and her mental strength had decreased by at least 15%. After a few concentrated shots, she realized that she couldn't stop this god from entering. She wasn't strong enough to kill a god like killing a dog. She could only show limited attention to this god who wanted to squeeze in. She drew an incantation with her hand and summoned an owl, which pointed to a few spots in the distance. She couldn't let this god's blood go to the passers-by. There were too many such scenes in novels. 2 max-level characters fought until the ground shook and the sky shook. In the end, both of them were seriously injured, and the main character went to take advantage of the situation. Thea wasn't so selfless. She didn't care about people in 2008, let alone people in 2166. She would be angry if anyone dared to fight with her. She silently stopped in the air to recover her strength. She wanted to fight this god fair and square. Fortunately, Horus was busy and didn't use his mind-reading ability. Otherwise, he would have spat at her face. You opened 4 holes in my body? God's blood was different from human blood. Human blood could spurt out like a fountain, but God's blood could not do the same. Every drop of God's blood was extremely precious, and some could even affect a god's godhood. To a certain extent, this was an important indicator of a god's combat power. If too much blood was lost, the god's divine position could be knocked off, causing eternal death. Horus saw that Thea was silently controlling her chi and preparing to fight with him in a fair and square manner. He thought that she was holding back her ultimate move. Although he looked down on human beings, he knew that he was now a target. The woman in golden armor opposite him could totally kill him. He didn't know that Vandal was currently being chased by Rip Hunt like a dead dog, and was still secretly hating the priest for not being helpful enough. Seeing the god in such a difficult situation, he didn't continue to provide support. As long as he recovered a bit more strength, he would be able to enter the prime material plane from this place where the gods slumbered. He finally made up his mind to cut off the connection with his original habitat and break through by force. With a roar, Horus's divine power circulated wildly. His god's body, which was 1 size larger, swelled up again. Aha! Ripples visible to the naked eye rushed in all directions. The sky, the earth, and the sea all felt an inexplicable tremor. Countless eagles and falcons all over the world soared into the sky and cried out loudly. Countless signs indicated that a true god had once again returned to the world after experiencing the twilight of the gods. Naturally, Thea could also see these strange scenes. She could only say, "What the F***CK? What's the big deal about the background music?" The special effects of this person's appearance were enough to touch the heavens and the earth. "My name is Horus. I am the son of Osiris and Isis. I am the patron saint of Letopolis. I am in charge of all justice and law in the world. You should bathe in the glory of the gods and worship me under the supreme sovereignty. This is the gift of the gods. This is the only contribution of your humble life. As for this person who didn't come out to fight, he first introduced himself and talked about his 8 generations of ancestors. Thea came to watch with the attitude of watching a show. But when he talked about worship, the humble life, Thea was a little unhappy. Was he talking about her in a roundabout way? With a true God here, what are you waiting for if you don't bow? Hey Birdman, it's a democratic society now. Your sovereignty was gone 4,000 years ago. Thea didn't dare to get too close. She didn't know what kind of attack this guy had. But looking at his bird head, no eagle head, she could roughly guess that this guy must be very fast. Horus, who was 10 meters tall, dark, with the head of an eagle, naked upper body, and a linen sheet wrapped around his lower body, was stunned by her words. He couldn't help but ask, "Is the 4th dynasty over?" Thea nodded and said in her heart, "God, you are right. Not only the Ming dynasty is gone, but the Qing dynasty is also gone." Horus got his answer and was obviously a little stunned. He looked around. His divine thoughts swept across the land with a radius of tens of thousands of kilometers. The thousands of years of human civilization development and knowledge accumulation were all analyzed by him. He shook his huge eagle head with some dissatisfaction. It seemed that the development of this world was somewhat beyond his expectations. "Thou art the most powerful person among the humans. You are qualified to rest under my throne. Kneel down and accept my blessings. This is an honor that you can't imagine." Horus figured out the context of the changes in the world and was a little confused. He couldn't tell whether some changes were good or bad. But what kind of existence was he? He was a god. It could only be the world that adapted to him. It was impossible for him to accept the world. In the face of Thea, a time traveler who could hurt him, although he was a little annoyed, he was ready to recruit people and continue to build the kingdom of heaven on earth. In his impression, humans were unbelievably weak. If he were to condescend to rope them in, the other party would definitely bow down and worship him. As for why Vandals summoned him, he didn't care at all. Gods could order humans, but how could humans command gods? He threw Vandals' wishes to the sky without thinking. Thea was amused by him. What did he mean? The Prime Minister could hold a boat, but this god was better. Did he want to take her in without any grudges? "Please, we haven't fought yet. How can I just surrender? Also, where did you learn to speak like you're singing?" Thea had goosebumps when he sang. Thea repeatedly checked and didn't feel that this god was very powerful. Except for his appearance and his singing, there didn't seem to be anything special. In terms of energy intensity, Thea was a little higher. This guy looked powerful. But Thea felt that he was seriously injured and was summoned to fight before he recovered. According to the game data, this guy's upper limit of health and magic was extremely high. But now he only had a little bit of health left, and his magic was almost at the bottom. Compared to Thea, who had full health and magic, it was not certain who would win if they fought. Thea was too lazy to talk nonsense with him. They couldn't talk on the same channel. She mobilized all the magic in her body, accumulated momentum, and prepared to arm wrestle with this guy. Her sudden surge of momentum surprised Horus a little. Shouldn't this person kneel down and kowtow? Why did she look like she was going to fight? "I've already forgiven you. Why are you so stubborn?" Although he didn't understand, the majesty of gods couldn't be blasphemed, and he didn't bother to explain. "If you want to fight, then let's fight." Thea could see that he was very weak. Of course he knew better. After being awakened from eternal sleep, he was in a very bad state. Even if an ordinary priest used the right process, at most it would attract his attention. The priest's ability was not enough to bring him to this world. Fortunately, Vandal Savage was not from Class 1. He was from Class 3. By crazily extracting Vandal's immortal life force, Horus finally entered the world that was once filled with the footprints of the gods after going through many hardships.